do think we can get started. So we'll begin with our April 13th Admin and Public Works Committee meeting. We are starting at 5:30 tonight, so appreciate again your flexibility here as we work to help with our city team and making their work-life balance better. And so this is one of the efforts that we discussed in the committee to get started here. I do want to welcome Mr. Piercy from MoDOT, who will be speaking here. And we will go ahead and begin with the roll call.
Okay, Chair Garitano,
Present.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Here.
Councilmember Brost. I see him. Councilmember Brost.
Here.
Okay. Councilmember Edens. Here. Councilmember Farmer.
Here.
Councilmember Flashar. Councilmember Rambo.
Here.
Councilmember Remy.
Present.
Okay, moving on, then we'll have the approval of the minutes for the March meeting. Is there a motion for the approval of the minutes for the March meeting? I see Councilmember Edens with your hand up. Is there a second for approval of the minutes? Councilmember Remy with his hand up. So we have a motion to approve the minutes. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All right. Any opposed? Any abstain? The minutes are approved. All right, we're going to open up now for public participation. So for our meeting, if you wish to participate, I do see one participant, Ms. Gilbert, who I am aware will be speaking as well. And I understand the mayor is also here that will be speaking during this time. So we'll get started. So if it's okay, I'll let Ms. Gilbert begin. And Ms. Gilbert, we're going to move you over to the panelist mode so that we can hear you. And then hopefully that should be unmuted, and then you'll be able to start and just introduce yourself and your ward, which I believe is Ward 1.
Ms. Gilbert, can you hear us?
It looks like she's on mute, Rick. Oh, I see that. Yeah, she's on mute.
Yeah, I thought
Could you do something on your end to trigger it to unmute? And I know Ms. Gilbert's joining by phone, so I don't know if there's I can look to hear to see if unmute on phone.
He's unmuted now.
Okay. Ms. Gilbert, looks like you're unmuted. So yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, my name is Marilyn Gilbert, and I reside in Ward 1. And I would like to thank Chairman Garitano for allowing me to speak tonight regarding our dangerous left turn problem for Woodland Meadows subdivision. Many of you have heard about this for years, and I know you're sick of hearing about it as much as we are about talking about it, but I just thought it was important that this committee, and with so many new city council members, that you all have an appreciation for what we've been living with. For over 15 years, we've been begging MoDOT to please fix a life-threatening problem they created at our intersection. And I'll gladly share any emails and correspondence. I've got tons of it. We've lived on our street for over 40 years. The westbound lane was safe until MoDOT installed a right turn lane for Melrose. That's the street across from us. So while we wait on the Highway 100 to make a left turn, drivers going 60 to 75 miles an hour illegally pass us using that right turn lane. Drivers behind that passing car are then suddenly seeing us, and they're driving too fast. Frequently, they can't stop. We have had rear end crashes and near-death accidents. You know, we're looking in our rear view mirror. We frequently have to abort our left turn to avoid being rear-ended by these inattentive and speeding drivers. If we get rear-ended by someone going 55 miles an hour and they push us into the eastbound traffic, we are having an impact of over 100 miles per hour. We're dead. In 2014, MoDOT's response to our pleas for help was really discouraging. They said until a fatality occurs at that intersection, MoDOT would most likely not make our intersection a priority. Every day, my neighbors, my husband and I, our family, friends, we do whatever it takes to avoid being that fatality. I would encourage you all to drive out westbound 100, stop at our street, and try to make a left turn. It is a frightening experience. In 2018, after years of accidents, our neighbor's truck being totaled, and constantly, daily, near-miss accidents, we finally said, what are we going to do? We need help. So we went to our councilman at the time, Dr. Greg Nani. And I said, we need help from the city of Wildwood. He and Rick Brown worked nonstop to get us a solution. And I attended many public safety committee meetings working to get a solution. And the city's support and persistence to correct this situation has been wonderful. I especially want to thank Rick, our current Ward 1 council members, Larry and Teresa, Mayor Bolin, who met with us several times and pledged his support, Mr. Garitano, and our Wildwood police officers. We also thank the City Council for supporting and passing these resolutions to insist MoDOT solve our safety problem. Resolution 2018-26 specifically asked MoDOT to give us a safe left turn. Rick Brown also sent a letter to MoDOT. Resolution 2018-35 was passed and sent to MoDOT. This declared the City of Wildwood's priorities for road improvements. There were over 16 roads prioritized, and our intersection was number 3. Residents of Woodland Meadows were the only ones with a problem intersection on Highway 100 to have signed a petition and sent the letters asking MoDOT to fix the dangerous intersection. Dr. Greg Nani and Rick Brown sent countless letters to Karen Yeomans of MoDOT. Requests for help were sent to State Representative DeGroot and Dottie Bailey. Dottie attended our meeting with Mayor Bolin, and she pledged her support. And she had been talking to MoDOT frequently and just, giving a roadblock. She came to a meeting at our house, and while sitting on Highway 100, waiting to make her left turn, she was illegally passed, something we deal with almost daily. And she was really shaken and horrified. She goes, oh I couldn't live like this. State Senator Schatz was contacted, and he seemed willing to help. All the politicians were really dismayed by MoDOT, by their indifference and the constant excuse that there's no money for our project. Well, you can always find money somewhere. In August of 2018, Rick Brown proposed a simple restriping of our intersection, costing $184,000. For a city that spends millions on parks, that's a very small amount. It gave us a left turn and removed the Melrose right turn lane, the source of all of our problems. But MoDOT said no, they would do their own conceptual design, which they did, and it gave us a left turn lane and retained the Melrose right turn lane. But the cost was $500,000. So it went from $184,000 to $500,000. This option would appear to be ready for implementation today because it's outlined in their 2019 Highway 100 study. MoDOT kept insisting if the city of Wildwood wanted to pay, well, we would get a safe left turn lane and really quickly. So currently, our only hope is Resolution 2021-04. That's that application to the East-West Gateway Council for federal funding. If we're blessed with a yes, that would be great, but it will be 3 years before that left turn lane is built. And we need a safe interim solution, and that's what the mayor asked for. And so we were really looking forward to hearing MoDOT's review of this Route 100 road safety audit being discussed tonight. But when we read the report, we were really disappointed in the recommendations because it appears, again, after 15 years of pleading, MoDOT has denied us a safe interim solution. You know, there is a reasonable $184,000 interim solution not reflected in this safety audit study that was done. One of their recommendations is to install a side road warning sign. And we said, well, how does that improve our left turn safety issues that have to deal with illegal passing and excessive speed? So I'm hoping that somebody can address that tonight, because we don't see how a side road warning sign helps our safety. And I guess we were surprised that MoDOT wouldn't at least add a do not pass sign somewhere in that area so that it might get the attention. You know, people who are perpetually illegally passing on that right, they might ignore it, but you never know. We might get lucky. Maybe it'll get their attention and they'll stop. Any other major problem is just the excessive speeds that are encountered on Highway 100. I mean, it's like the Autobahn. It's really bad. And when you're sitting there dead stopped on a highway, knowing all that traffic behind you, it may stop and it may not. So it's pretty frightening. So again, thank you for letting me speak tonight. We truly appreciate all the time and the attention the City of Wildwood has devoted to this. But it looks like we still need your help because the study didn't really seem to address our problem. So if anyone has any questions or if there's any correspondence you want, I'll be happy to share it.
Thank you, Ms. Gilbert. Sorry about that. I was on mute here. So thank you for your comments. We'll proceed then with the next speaker, Mr. Boland, Mayor Boland.
Well, before if I may, Mr. Chairman, while Ms. Gilbert is on the line, I just want to mention something that's relevant to her comments and that occurred today. I was speaking with our chief, our captain, about one of the very issues that she brought up, and that concerns the speeding on 109 and specifically, or I'm sorry, on Highway 100, and specifically the there's a name for it. Ryan or Mr. Piercy probably knows what it is. It's the box that they put with, you know, this is your speed. There's one of those that's at
The speed
Town
trailer.
Center next to the pedestrian bridge. What was that? I'm sorry, Joe.
Speed trailer.
Speed trailer. And he indicated that they being our police, had some issues with respect to, with MoDOT relative to certifying a number of different things as to, you know, that these are not going to cause an accident and so on and so forth. And I think both the captain and I appreciate the need to make sure that whatever we're trying to do to improve safety doesn't cause less safety. All I want to do is mention, number one, that we've had that conversation for Ms. Gilbert's benefit. And number two, Mr. Piercy, if you could please do your best to work with our captain to make sure that if we put those on Highway 100, as I expect we will, we can get that expedited, and whatever issues need to be done relative to ensuring the safety for MoDOT's right of way, if we could expedite that and get that resolved, I would greatly appreciate it.
We would greatly appreciate it too.
I'm sensing that's an easy ask from Mr. Piercy. I see him shaking his head yes.
Yeah, we've discussed that multiple times in the past regarding the apparatuses regarding speed capture and your speed limit signs. We've discussed that multiple times in the past regarding it is not a crash tested item, which all MoDOT right-of-way signals and all those are, the signage and the breakaway post and all that, everything that's on our right-of-way, it has been crash tested and approved. Some of those speed tests, and I think what was shown that could be mounted to a breakaway pole, the issue with those, and it's the same, this is coming from Central Office Traffic and Safety, that upon any type of accident that would happen to where those would be placed in the right-of-way and where they're shown, they become a projectile that can be physically cause harm. It's happened in the past too, which is the main reason, the main hiccup that it's not a protected item, nor is it crash tested.
Right.
And there are no, for anything to be placed in our right of way, everything that's approved on the federal level has to be a crash tested approved item. So, however, in regards to the speed trailer, and I know they're bigger, however, I had no problem when Captain Mundell threw out, can we utilize the speed trailer, show folks what they're doing and getting it out there and apply a permit to put those in place. There wasn't any issue with putting those up at all. It was sent through, and I'd made our special use permits in the traffic department aware so they could get out and utilize, so they can get some stuff. Not to mention those drivers that are existing in those excess speeds can see exactly what they're doing if they do not know, or if they do know and they're doing it on purpose. But obviously it is an issue in other locations too, where folks and drivers are driving very aggressively and excess speeds, that I understand it as an issue.
Right. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much. And I know that you have to go through, certain issues and resolve those with respect to the placement. All I would just ask is, like I said, if you can just work with us as best you can to get that expedited and work with our captain, I'd appreciate it. And then, and I want to thank Ms. Gilbert for her comments on the important issues as well. And then on a different topic, when you're ready, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to speak just for a minute on the other item that I wanted, or actually the only item I wanted to speak to under public participation.
Yes, Mayor, you can go ahead and speak at this time. I don't see any other hands up, and we'll check one more time after you're done for any other public participants. So.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And I want to thank each of you for the time that you take, particularly after a long meeting like we had last night, to be part of another meeting today. And so I'm going to keep my comments short. I'm going to speak on what is labeled on your agenda as meeting start time, although I think that is not actually what at least I envision with respect to bringing this to the forefront and consideration of the committee. And I'll explain why in just a second, and so forth, relative to how it's titled. So before I get to that, I just want to say real quickly, I want to put this in context. So the context is flexibility. It's not meeting start time. It is flexibility, and it is flexibility for who? It is flexibility for the council, because these are council meetings. I preside at the meeting, but it is ultimately a council meeting. And so it's about flexibility. It's not about start time, and I'm gonna come back to that in a moment. And so relative to the agenda item and how it's named, I would say it's an agenda item for flexibility. It's not an agenda item for start time. And in fact, if you want to leave the start time at 7 o'clock, I'm fine with that. And I'll explain why in just a moment. The second thing I want to say, the flexibility for a council meeting start time, and I think a lot of our residents, certainly West News, didn't really and don't understand why that could ever be controversial. It's something that frankly helps us. And I understand there's some leftover sentiment from the old St. Louis County days before our city was incorporated, and how St. Louis County would, and I don't know this for a fact, I've heard this third, fourth, and fifth hand from some of the people involved, 25 to 30 years ago, would schedule meetings and there was no notice, and they would happen in the middle of the afternoon. And whether that occurred or not really doesn't matter at this point. And I don't know for a fact that it did. What does matter is the state of Missouri has sunshine law rules, and the city attorney is on here tonight, and he can tell you that all of those worries don't exist anymore to the extent they ever were worries, because you can't do that anymore. You can't have meetings and not give people notice of it and advance notice of it that allow for public participation and so forth. The other thing I want to mention as a prefacing remark, and John Young, our city attorney, as I said, is on here, and I think he will tell you this, to his knowledge and to my knowledge, no other city, certainly in the area, if not the state, has in its charter, not in a council ordinance or not in a resolution, those are things that can be readily changed, in its charter that you must start your meeting at exactly this time and no earlier, no ifs, ands, or buts, no matter what happens in this world, COVID or otherwise. And a charter is reserved for things that are destined, more than likely, to stay in place on a permanent basis, such as we have 16 council members, we have one mayor, we have one city administrator. Not when to start a meeting, with all due respect to those who prepared that document many, many moons ago. So again, I'm interested in flexibility, not the meeting start time. Why am I interested in flexibility? I'm just going to give you a couple of examples that affect all of us. Agendas differ. They differ from meeting to meeting, and in some cases, depending on how the city moves forward, well after we are all gone, those agendas could differ considerably. They might have one thing, they might have 20 things. Number two, related to that, there's no requirement that we have a work session. There may be some instances where we don't have a work session. Number three, weather. We saw that happen the very night that this came for debate. Number four, COVID, and how we handle that. And so to hamstring the council and the mayor by saying no ifs, ands, or buts in perpetuity, we're going to have a meeting start time with no flexibility in our charter of all places is wrong, and it should be changed. So I want to lastly mention that I appreciate very much the effort that came to the council last time with respect to this issue, which was, okay, well, we'll move the start time. And again, I'm not worried about 6:37, and I'm going to conclude with that last remark in a moment, but we're only going to do it if it's remote participation. That is exactly what I think we don't want to do, which is to put more stuff in the charter that hamstrings the council as to the specificity of all things, a start time for a council meeting. So these are the words in closing I want to leave with you. Less is more. And I think our city attorney would support what I just said, particularly when you're dealing with the charter. Frankly, this shouldn't even be in the charter. And the best approach would be to take it out of the charter entirely, and for the council to be able, as it does for all other meetings, like we did last night with the public hearing, to set the procedures and the timing by ordinance. Why? Flexibility. It gives the council flexibility. Leaving something in the charter does not do that. But if you want to leave it in the charter, and this is my ask, you can leave it at 7 o'clock, but the language John provided, which was, or as otherwise determined by the council, that's the key part. It's not the start time, it is the flexibility part of this. And I would respectfully ask you, again, in closing, to put this in context. This is not controversial. It's a start time. It is logical. It's something that no other city does. It shouldn't even be there. That would be the big ask, and that's what we ought to do. But if you're not comfortable doing it, please just put in to give us flexibility, or is otherwise determined by the council, and that's it. So I'm happy to answer questions. The city attorney's here, and if he wants to speak to anything that he disagrees with, now would be the time. Otherwise, if you have any questions for me or him, I'm sure that, I'm happy to answer them, and I know John would be too. So that's the background and the ask on this issue. So, thanks for listening.
Thank you, Mayor Bowen. All right, I'm going to check one more time just to see if there's anyone else that is a participant or attendee that wishes to speak. But otherwise, we'll go ahead and proceed with closing out public participation. All right, seeing none, then we'll close out public participation. Thanks again, Mayor Boland, for your comments.
you
and
so
Ms.
much.
Gilbert. So we're going to go ahead and proceed with our agenda over here. So moving on to Public Works, we have no for information items, but our first item is for action, which is the MoDOT presentation. So, yes, Mr. Cross, City Administrator.
I'm sorry, maybe I missed it. Did we do the approval of minutes?
Yes.
We did.
Yes, I seconded it.
Yeah,
All right.
and we did have a voice vote, if I recall correctly. Yep. And if-
All right. Sorry, I must have missed that. I apologize.
no worries. I'm glad you're checking and keeping us straight here. So, so we'll go ahead and now we're going to have the MoDOT presentation. So again, a warm welcome to Mr. Piercy here. The presentation is a PDF that is in the agenda there. So, Mr. Piercy, as we were talking about before, when you asked about how long you had, I think the most efficient way possible that you feel you can communicate the findings of your assessment here. And then at that point, we'll open it up to questions from the council members and participants here, from our city team that, they may have related to what's in that report there. Mr. Piercy, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right. All right. Thanks for having me all. So yeah, regarding the RSA study that we had going on. So I guess, and I appreciate some of the things that I heard from Ms. Gilbert, I get more pieces of all this as I keep, delving into history and going back and hearing more and more and more, regarding just the inception of this a long time ago, where she said she had worked with, Karen in the past, who was my predecessor. We had worked, and what I'd presented, I think September of last year, we'd completed a traffic safety evaluation along here Route 100 to try to look at about any type of potential improvements along the corridor that had started from, like, what Ms. Gilbert was talking about, and back with Representative DeGroot was talking about turning improvements at Woodland Meadows. Some of the other things that she was talking about and some of the other ideas, I wouldn't mind taking a peek and looking, and I can even run that by my area team to chat. Some of those things I wasn't aware of myself still. Initially, when that started about the turning improvements, and when we started looking in and we started broadening that traffic study, the scope was expanded just because there was areas that didn't meet left turn warrants originally, but that criteria had changed, and we had kind of expanded it on to see, well, now that can we look at these in other areas along Route 100, maybe additional turning movements, maybe those warrants can be placed. On top of that, we'd also had the issues, and we'd had concerns around Pond and T with what had happened, and some of the unfortunate accidents were happening there. The study just kind of grew to where we were kind of like a growing contract, and we wanted to just see, because, the locations like Pond and T, signals kept being asking for, there was warrants that weren't being met. So we were trying to see, well, what other implementations and other things could we be done? Through that process, people knew, and we discussed that we were doing the study throughout the area. People were wanting to know, updates on the study. I remember talking with other public when they sent me emails and not kind of letting them know it was nothing I was trying to be secretive about. It was nothing I was hiding from anyone, but the full report, as we talked about in the past, with some of the issues and some of those things in there, it's not a sunshineable document due to some of the protected natures and some of the crash data that's in there. That's just state statute. We were working with Senator Schatz's office and his assistants. We were talking with the city. We kind of worked along the pot that, if I take out some of that sensitive data so you guys can see, I was having discussion with folks over at the city too. Again, it wasn't anything that I was trying to keep. I go, these are some of the findings that we've been seeing. These are some of the costs. This is what we've been seeing. I was trying to continuously share that information to say what was going on. We kind of talked at the council meeting. And again, like I said, it's, when we can work through and implement, working through some of these things regarding how we've been forward funding our asset management plan, and our big uptick right now is our ADA transition. throughout my area, I have the lion's share of this work. They're very extensive projects, and they're taking up a majority of what we can program in all our upcoming STIPs. And we've had a multitude of those ADA projects that we were trying to get in that they were too large to program and didn't fit. So we can continuously keep going. That's kind of the information that was presented. It's kind of the backstory. That's what was presented early on. That's what I talked about at one of the previous meetings. And that's when it was kind of asked that, regarding how we're moving forward and when we can program some of these improvement projects and when other future asset management projects are coming along, what can be done. In the meantime, what can we do? And, a road safety assessment is something we can go through. And, it was requested and asked, can maybe we get together? Can maybe we pull our data? Can we go out? Can we chat and have some more extensive conversations regarding what could be done at not only, where the whole thing started around Woodland Meadows, but, we included some of the turns at Pond and T, but we're also looking at Hecken and Hawks Rest and Booness Lane. And I think we expanded some others too, since we were pre-COVID. They try to limit you on the stretch, but we were all driving in big caravans. So after, we kind of would spitball ideas, talk, gather information, get the documents. We set a date to where we could go out and try to, specifically go out, still be distant, still be safe. So we're still following all our guidelines that our department is following, and physically get some pictures, see what we're seeing out on all those roadways, and see if there's anything interim wise before any type of expansion projects can be implemented. What can be done to just raise a little bit more awareness on, so people can see where they're going, what's going on, where they're driving into. I can't do a lot of the things about the aggressive driving and the excess speeds. I understand is an issue. We have it in issues at other places. It's not really something I can design for, and I see it when I drive on too. It's a pet peeve of mine, whether a phone's up, down, or anything like that. I understand people's concern about that. We went ahead and we went through. It was myself, two of my traffic engineers, Captain Mundell, and both folks from the city of Wildwood. It was Rick Brown and Brendan Mayer. They were both out there, and we were, formulating and continually talking about this. We extended stuff out to like Mueller, Wild Horse Creek, and after all that talking, some of the initial items that we chat about that could be done and what could be implemented. What can be implemented on our side through work requests, through traffic orders, is what we were trying to look at, what we can do on our side with our own means, and not something that needs to be programmed into a federal fiscal job that requires, a federal job number and fiscal reimbursements on that. What can we do on our side? So in interim measures that we kind of came up with that was looked upon, there was the, some of the reflective sheeting that you can see that kind of, better highlight the areas and striping and the signage along that area. We looked at areas where possibly there was striping that had been removed over time. We every year we're going through our annual restriping. We try to get in additional work orders where the restripe needs to go. It's striping wears, and the reflectivity seems to go every year. Nobody has figured out in the state or the country, depending on, whether it's 25 cents per linear foot or $1.25 per linear foot. It seems like every year after it's laid down, after one good snow and a couple good plows, it starts wearing down and that reflectivity comes out. So, however, just to get areas that might've been not showcased, we were, restriping specific areas. There are locations where maybe we could utilize, where maybe the raised islands used to be. There's some areas that look like they've been removed in the past. Maybe we could put some of the lower reflective ballers in place, put those out there. Some of the things, the advanced side road warning signs with the plaques that say the names, trying to get some of those installed out there to where I don't know why some of the rear end crashes happen. Maybe a lot of times if folks are traveling at XX speeds and they don't know where their turn's coming up, if they knew that ahead of time and also saw that additional plaque, it's not something that's normally outlined in our policy guide, but just out here in this area, it was something that maybe we can bypass standard criteria and we can still get those ordered with the road warning ahead signs with the exact street name too, to get those out there. Some additional signs we're going to be, whether it's the green on white or the warning signs, we're going to go out there. And one of the bigger ones that we kind of talked about was, can we enhance maybe the stop going into Route T coming down from St. Albans? That was one of the bigger ones that, when we're coming in, I know there's 2 warning signs that say you're coming up on Route T, but maybe we could get something a little more, flashy for those that are coming down there before they get to T to just say, there is a dead end stop coming up around here down the line. So that's kind of the majority of what the enhancements that we saw. We went by location and kind of called out, I think in the document, there's a better description on what exactly, each one can do and what the prescribed treatment is. We also kind of utilized some of the additional, we utilized Google, and I tried to give a physical representation at each location that we called out. It could be done in the meantime. I don't know if everything's perfectly shown on there. I tried to draft it as best I could. It's not, I haven't been in CAD and I don't play with, Adobe too much, but I was hoping that just an additional physical representation, could be shown on there and, between the description that's shown in the report and what's reported underneath the picture is something that those are things that we can do on our side that bit by bit, I've already been working on. I've already been inventorying, signing, and striping department. I've already sent in some of the inventories for some of the additional signs that get detailed and sent it to central office. I'm trying to, even before this and before anything was finalized, we'd all agreed it was a good idea to move forward with some of these. And I was already trying to move the gears in the right direction to start getting some of these implemented to where I can get a work order reviewed by the traffic department, approved, and then the district maintenance in here, they will approve our maintenance staff and our forces to, do some of this work bit by bit as we're moving down the corridor. I know we've inventoried some of the reflective material. We've identified how much more we need to order, and we've got those signs detailed, going down and detailed as well. In general, that was the idea and the request and what we were working on. And the goal was trying to do something to make people a little bit more notice where they're driving, where they're going, what they can see, and make sure that just a little more safety items as they're going down these corridors. Like I said, I can't deal with a lot of the aggressive, distractive, or excessive speeds and passing that's being described by us right now. That's something, even with the implementation and some of the expansion things, those are something that I still see some of that existing regarding some of those things that can be input. At least you got a little bit more room and down the road if we can implement some of these improvements. But in the meantime, just trying to make these intersections pop a little bit more, trying to give people a little bit more forewarning on some of those side roads and try to remove some of the hesitation or the brakes screeching, or let people know, oh, there's my turn, I got to go now, and they hit the brakes, and then a couple people find each other in the rear ends. Those were some of the purposes of what we were doing, and that's why some of the things that we saw seemed to make sense. And even though we don't do it, and a lot of these things we don't do at a lot of additional locations, we were just with some of the requests that were coming through here, something in their interim measure to make it a little bit more safer until larger projects could come through. It was our initial goal, and that's what we presented. So I don't know if there's additional questions on specific locations, ideas about some of the things. I'm always open to chat and discuss and talk. Like I said, I've tried to get the wheels turning already to where we can start doing a lot of those things. So, I wasn't, even before, I think we were all in approval, and, before I was just, even before, the city would say, hey, yeah, we think this is great. When can you get started? I've already tried to get the traffic department working on those requests just to get it going, just because we had already talked about it, and I didn't see any reason to waste and wait for additional stuff, So I'm not sure. I can bring it open. Yeah. If anyone wants to talk some more.
Yeah, we're going to entertain some questions. I know that probably there's some specific questions regarding spots and areas along the road. Maybe before we get into that, just to kind of make sure we have clarity, I do notice that, yes, some of the items that you have in your report have already been implemented, like the larger street name signs. I noticed that at Pond, Mueller, but
I think that's your guys' doing.
oh, is that us?
Yeah.
It was in the report though, right? Was that?
Yeah. I'll take credit, but I believe it was you.
Oh, I see. All
Yeah,
right.
Rick smiling. He did. Brendan was working on that himself. That was a city thing.
Well, that's good to know. I guess, Ryan, I was going to give you credit then. All right. Well, good job, Rick, then. But, what's the timeline then as far as getting through your list? I think that's going to be an obvious question, and I figured maybe you could just address it, and then we'll get into the questions.
I wish I had a decent timeline for you. I really, really do. Like I said, I've been inventorying. We've been going through, and we've got the work orders and requests going through. They get approved through the district traffic engineer. And even when they're ready for that, it's the district maintenance engineer that approves. They go through all those work requests and they approve the maintenance department in which area would be doing it. More likely it'll be our Eureka maintenance shed. There's approval process that I am not involved in. Regardless, I've given our superintendent and our maintenance staff forewarning that this is stuff that we would kind of like to have been done. And I will nudge as much as possible as I can. I can't control all the additional, maintenance requests that come in, and nor can I dictate everything the district maintenance engineer can say can be done. I'm trying to stretch that out and get it done as bit by bit, and additional striping requests too. They're all different crews. All the work requests have been going in. I try to do my best to keep track, and when I know them, when I have numbers, I can continue to watch them. I wish I could say by set date it would be done. I just don't have that level of control on these. There's too many other additional acting gears that are in there, but I've tried to do everything on my end and my part, and those with the area team that I work with saying, get them in, get them ordered. What do we have? What do we need? Like I said, we've already sent the signing details to central office for signs that we don't have, and the additional plaques. It takes, time to send those off. There's one guy in the entire state that does that. He's the one that does the MUTD, standards and designs for all our projects, and everything else. If it's anything that's in the manual, traffic design manual that we can get, those are pretty known. But drafting the other ones, just making sure they're up to the most federal standards, and then getting them fabricated and sent to our office so they can be implemented. Those take time too. But I've already started working on that to get them ready so we can at least get them in the office. And, it'll be something additional. And I'm talking with our district maintenance engineer saying, I have an area out here that we've been doing a lot of work on. I'd like to just, can you, approve a few more of these down the line so we can get, I don't think it's an issue of our maintenance staff getting anything kind of drafted, implemented. If additional signs are going to get in, you got to get the locates out there so we know we're not sticking it in somewhere that we're going to find something we're not supposed to. But they know all those. Once they get the green light for approval, it's usually not hard for them to activate and get going. But I know, looking at the list of things, I've asked that multiple times in other areas, in other cities, and other locations, just in my area alone, regarding this has been in limbo for a while. So I'm not trying to blow you off. I just don't have a great answer for that one. Like I said, I'm working in within the time frame that I can, and doing everything on our part to get the stuff out there, and then continually bugging my coworkers to the point where, yeah, I'll get that for you, and not to the point where they're going to start ignoring me and we're not going to have anything, then we kind of lose productivity along the area. So
Now, I understand that. Thank you for that. All right, I'm going to open it up. I know we've got some specific questions that I think folks want to get there, see if you can help answer. So I'm going to start with Councilmember Bertolino, who had his hand up, and then followed by Councilmember Clark and Edens. So Dave, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you, Joe. And thank you, Ryan, for joining us tonight. I appreciate that. I don't envy your position. I imagine you've got city after city after you to do things, and you only have so many dollars to do it with, which leads me to my first question. Ron, you've got, you've estimated here about a $4.4 million ticket to take care of the J-turns and the left turns, and that's obviously at today's dollars. If you broke that down, and if the city said we would come in at an 80-20 with the state, we do 80, you do 20, would that allow you to move these projects maybe on an annual basis? Say, take the worst one, maybe Pond or State Route T, and say, if we did an 80-20 with the state, where would that influence you enough to put it high on the priority to get funding to do this quickly?
Hey, Dave, just a comment, maybe just because I think Rick is, if I'm reading Rick's mind, you know, he probably wants to talk about that there is that application we've made for funding, right? So I just want to make sure Rick has a point to say that.
Yeah, it'd probably be worth mentioning, council members. If you don't recall, we have recently, and I know Ryan Piercy knows this because he worked with us on it. We did recently put in a federal funding application for 2 projects, both of these Route 100 improvement projects. So one project would include the 4 turn lane locations, including Woodland Meadows, Lunas, Hinken, and Hawks Rest. And the second project was for the J turns to be constructed at Pond and Route T. So we put in 2 separate funding applications, one for each of those projects. We haven't heard whether we were successful in our application yet, but hopefully within the next 30 days or so, we'll get an indication if one or both are successful. And we did put those in at 80-20. So the city would pick up 20%, make sure I get that correct. We would pick up 20% of the cost, and then 80% would come from the federal government. So that's out there. Now, the next step could be, you know, if that does not go through, either one of them or both, you know, then what would we do? MoDOT does have a cost share program that might be the next possibility, but perhaps that won't be necessary. We'll hopefully know something very soon.
Joe? Thanks, Rick. And yeah, I had not forgotten those applications, but to Ryan, this is going to be a state construction project, not a city one. So if we were successful with these applications, where does that put us on the to-do list from the state standpoint?
So if you're successful in the applications, for the most part, you'd be working through our local public agency office, because this would be awarded, like, and since they're STP funds, our LPA office is the one that oversees it for the time being. You know, regarding, and it's the same thing when you guys successfully applied for cost share in the past too. Now that's still working with us regarding reviews, you know, consultant reviews and anything done in the state system regarding standards and specs. So, but you know, the application that you would have, and Rick outlined it between the fiscal years, and I don't have the years off the top of my head regarding, you know, what's done in 23, you know, you're awarded this year, and then you do your preliminary engineering and anything in 23 and implementation and construction. And when the construction engineering happens, you know, between 23, 24 and 25, I think those are the years it all happens. So that's outlined. I get off, I always miss a year or two in between, just trying to figure it out. But that whole process would be not only oversight, you know, the consultant and all the review would be done going through our LPA office, but area team oversight and review the plans. We'd obviously be included and working very closely with the city on all that regarding what we would be doing. So
if I heard you, Ryan, then if in very simple terms, if we get the money from the Fed and the city comes up with a 20%, we're looking at at the most, I would say that we're looking at construction in 24, 23.
I think it hits you around 24, 25, the way it works now.
Okay. All right. If all goes well, then we've got the money. What you're saying, Ryan, from your crystal ball, we're looking at construction somewhere out 4 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's when the money's, you know, through the application and all that, that's when the money's available for each stage. So.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. And if I could just maybe ask a related question, because if related to this topic, Ryan, when this process is going through reviewing the applications, is there an opportunity for MoDOT to submit a letter of endorsement on this application. I know there's a comment period for citizens to submit that, but I think that would be a great opportunity if that's something that can help with a letter of support for these projects.
Yeah, that's part of the application. Rick submitted those prior to. Usually we always ask for, if you're thinking about going forward for any type of STP or East West Gateway funds, usually you send any additional information or anything you have 4 weeks in advance, and there's a review process that's done on the OPA side. Fortunately we did a safety evaluation study that had a lot of this information and could already be provided and go through it. But there's still that internal process to see if there's anything that any flags to go off on our list. But yeah, that's part of any East West Gateway application, our internal review and letter support. And that was given and sent, I think, a while ago. I hope the copy made it to the city. If not, I can give you one. I can give you my copy.
Okay, so thanks for allow me to add that follow-up question related to that. All right, next I have Councilmember Clark.
Thank you, Chair Garitano, and thank you, Mr. Piercy, for being here. And thank you to Rick, because he's done a lot of work on this to get it where we're at right now. But I want to go back to the interim projects. And you've done some so far, and you talked about a lot of maybe this and maybe that. I was wondering if there's a way you can put it together in some kind of a matrix that shows the improvement proposed and maybe approved, and even if the timing, you have a box for timing, but it's maybe you have a TBD or something else in that until you know the timing, and then percent complete. This would be very helpful for us when we explain to the residents that there are things happening and there are things on the horizon also, because this is this is an issue that's been close to my heart too. And they have waited a long time for any help. And now that they're getting it, it would be nice to tell them what they're getting and what they can foresee to get in the future.
So I know when it gets approved on my side, like I said, when I have our traffic engineers go through and they start putting in the work request, and then it gets approved on my side, I get a notification that it's at least been approved by the district traffic engineer. And then it's always the last bell is always getting our maintenance engineer to sign off on it. So when I get, sometimes they come in droves, sometimes they trickle in regarding when. Like I said, I have weekly meetings with my traffic engineers that have been doing this all along. I'll get the numbers when they've been reported, and I can try to do, I'll start tracking some of the knowledge to see. I mean, some of the information you're talking about is something I'm a little more kind of curious about myself. I've had work requests kind of get lost in the stratosphere before. I've even had some reports on my side that I guess got put over that. When the regime changed and I became the area engineer, I inherited a couple that I didn't even know were out there, and I ended up calling in and calling for call reports that have been out in this limbo that I didn't even know existed for some time, and I kind of had to call and just kind of apologize that I didn't even know these things existed, and just kind of inherited and said I got it, and I'm starting to work with my team now. I apologize if it took a while. So some of those timeframes I'd kind of like to know as well that you're talking about. I try to track as much as possible too, saying, from the initial time that we talked, and I usually keep a track list item, how we can keep moving along the lines and how long it usually takes some of them to get implemented into installed. And like I said, I keep kind of trying to bump every time I have meetings with some of the supervisors and my coworkers, just saying, we got this is out there. And also trying to get a little bit more weight from folks above me, just saying, we've been chatting about this. We've been working with the city for a while. We'd like to get this, interim in the mix before those bigger improvements can come through, and hopefully we can work together and coincide as well. So I'll try to get an active timeline. That's information I'd kind of like to know too, when something goes in and kind of how it's trickling, and if there's any type of snag in the future where, why has it been sitting there for a little bit longer? I know there's a million thing on the maintenance engineer's side that, they approve every other work request that comes through for the entire district, not just this local area. So, I can't bogart the whole thing, but just implementing a little bit quicker on these parts, since I think it's a time sensitive of nature, I understand 100%.
Hey, Ryan, would you be receptive to kind of along Ms. Clark's thought there, taking table 1 out of the report and maybe adding a few more items or fields for information, so we can maybe utilize that for tracking, or when we get things done, we can note it in that table, or if we have additional information to provide regarding the timeline for implementation, maybe we can use that, or even it could be provided on a monthly basis to us. Would that be a possibility?
Yeah, I would. I can communicate with that with you guys regarding kind of monthly to see what's moving along. And like I said, if maybe we can get if something's not moving fast enough for either of us, kind of keep moving on to try to get some of these things done out there. So we're out there and they're complete, at least, for the time being. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed for the larger items.
Ryan, would it be helpful if we created that matrix for you, for the information we would be looking for, save you the trouble of developing it? We could create it, send it your way, and then you could fill in the boxes. We'd put it in an Excel spreadsheet, and you could just complete that as information becomes known to you, at least on a monthly basis or something. Would that help you?
If you have something that you may like to see a little bit better, or maybe it's something that you've utilized on your side to where you've seen it, otherwise, I'll just make it up on my own the way I've seen it. But I mean, if there's some type of process, or you guys have some type of form that coincides over to an Excel sheet, I mean, if the information is, if you have a better idea than something that I would kind of mock up in Excel, just kind of drafting as we move down the lines and some of these things start to go in there, if there's a better way you'd like to see it, I'm open. Otherwise it's just something as we start tracking, I can see it from, A to B, and just kind of watching it as it goes to make sure the process doesn't stop.
I'll tell you what, how about if we do this, Ryan? How about if we go ahead and mock something up for you, send it your way, and there may be some, and see if that would agree with what you would be doing anyway. That way we know the information that we're looking for is on there. Again, we're just trying to expedite the process a little bit and take a little bit of workload off your shoulders if we can. So if it's okay with you, I'll take the lead on that. I'll work with Rick and Councilmember Clark. We can draft something up and send it your way and see if that's acceptable to you to be the document that would go back and forth, just to kind of keep things, we can kind of keep tabs on things. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, I got no problem with that. I think that's just staying open and transparent and trying to keep us honest on both sides. I'm good.
All right. Thank you.
All right, next I have Councilmember Edens.
Well, Councilmember Clark and I were thinking along the same lines. What I was just simply going to suggest is when you can't control the rate of progress, you can always control the rate that information flows. So I'm looking forward to hearing regular reports to the department, even if there isn't progress to report. I think it's great to have a written record and a paper trail of that. My other question for you, Mr. Piercy, was Ms. Gilbert mentioned the previous mock-up Mr. Brown did with another temporary painting option that was a little over 100,000, and you said this was the first time you heard about it and you would be reviewing that. Can I get an estimation of how long that review process will take before you get back to the department?
Oh, I was just curious. I hadn't seen it before. That's all.
Okay.
So, I mean, I don't know if I have it in my inbox or if it's in previous archives. I hadn't seen it. So like I said, every time, I've built a narrative from the beginning, from scratch, from its inception to the point that was done, things that were done prior to, either even other government officials that started working on here that oversaw this area in the past, and, the ones that come in. So it seems like I kind of get a few additional pieces
Sure.
to kind of talk but I hadn't seen the pavement mock-up or markup that, I don't know if there's a little bit more expansion on that too. I just hadn't seen it in the past compared to what was initially resolved on our side too, regarding what was presented on ours, and then earlier what was shown. And then, I was just, curious of that piece as well, as I hadn't seen it in my time as well. So it was just something I was unaware of. It wasn't something I didn't know, a hardcore review as we were moving forward, what we were doing. I was just curious in general.
I mean,
Ryan, that was a conceptual design that we had Cochrane do early on.
Okay.
Get the ball rolling and get the discussion started relative to an improvement project. It was kind of a back of the napkin conceptual design they completed without survey. So it took a lot of assumptions in place, and it did not include the right turn lane. It omitted the right turn lane for Melrose, just had the left turn lane there at Woodland Meadows. So it's not an apples to apples comparison. So the costs are going to be lower for what we originally estimated, and that's in large part the difference. But I can forward it to you if you'd like to see it.
okay, I think that answered my question, was whether or not it can be considered as soon as possible for a temporary fix to last over the next 4 years. But it sounds like there's still some development on that.
Yeah, it's not a temporary fix. It's a permanent fix.
Permanent fix. Okay.
Yeah, and it was just a first conceptual cost estimate and design, and it's not an apples to apples comparison because it does not include the right turn lane for Melrose, which is included in the current project.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. And then I have one question that will perhaps seem ignorant, but this is where I need you to educate me. So when Ms. Gilbert brought up the illegal passing on the right, besides traffic signs that says, do not pass or illegal passing, and indications that a turn is coming up, is there any other standard traffic measure that would slow the speed of the cars, particularly in the right, like a rumble strip, that could be helpful at this time? I mean, I'm aware that it would add noise to the area, but just something that would make a driver feel like it was inconvenient to fly through there on the right and pass.
Are you talking like the same long-term rumbles that exist on T coming in before you stop that go across that you hit? Or are you talking about rumble strips along the road like you hit on the interstate?
I guess either. I mean, when I think of them, I think of the ones that are ground in, like where you'd merge on an interstate or something like that, like near 141 and 64.
Yeah.
But not an expert enough to make a concrete recommendation one way or another, but just something that says, this is an area where speed has to be slowed. And I think of that 64, 141 area.
I mean, yeah, for the most part, it's to implement, and one, either you're veering off the road or to prevent some type of crossover. From what I'm hearing and from what the report that I heard from Ms. Gilbert, it's people going around them that are flying so fast that don't want to go. It's just sheer unsafe driving. Even if we had the same thing where we already have rumble strips instituted out on, Business Loop out there at 44, where we've had an incident where it was the same thing. People are stopping to make a turn and people are passing them on the shoulder. And we have rumble strips and all that stuff established out there as well. I don't know how to answer how to slow people down. It's not even slowing them down. It's just making them drive appropriate.
Right.
It seems that's, and we can both try to figure out what's the best implementation. And I mean, even at a state level, we haven't figured that out exactly, how to make people drive responsibly, how to, and it's campaigns left and right. And I talk about it all the time. I even mentioned a little bit earlier about kind of my pet peeves. If I'm driving down the road and I see a phone in somebody's face, I get annoyed. If I see people not paying attention, driving at excess, I feel the same. I feel the same emotions that everybody's on the call and those that are talking to feel about it. I drive with my children as well, and I can't be more annoyed when somebody does something unsafe because they're not paying attention or they're driving too fast because they have to get somewhere 20 seconds faster than me. And it's a question with a very tough answer that I really don't have for you.
Okay.
And some of those rumble strips and long term and the crossovers, I mean, we put them in a lot of locations, and you know, if you have somebody that's just speeding along, wanting to get from A to B and doesn't care about the people in front of them, they just make those decisions. And a lot of that stuff is, and that's why we were trying to work with, you know, the police captain to try to implement. And we were looking at ways to try. I know they were trying to find speeds. I know they're trying to, you know, hey, can we identify where the speeds are actually taking place so we can put cars at specific locations at the right times, because everybody's limited on resources and all that. And, you know, trying to figure out, I'm not a traffic engineer expert regarding the applications or the tools that measure the speeds out there. I know ours that sit out there, they sit on the sides of the roads down at the bottom. And that was one of the bigger things too. Some of the things that were tracking the speeds on your guys' side, they needed to be posted to a speed sign. And it was that projectile problem that we were having. It was just something that, like, it's just not a safe apparatus that's ever been allowed on a road. And, you know, and I, like I said, I took that up to my higher officials in central office and I got brought down. You know, I don't know how those work and if it can be broadcast from a little bit further away. And those were conversations that Rick and Captain Mundell and I were trying to have, just saying, you know, could it be done? You know, like I said, some of these things where folks are just driving unsafe and uncanny speeds, it's just something that you know, I'm going to continue to work to see what we can kind of do, some of that information and speed data, whatnot around there that, you know, that we can share. We can always share speed data too. That's nothing that's not unshareable or anything that's not protected or state rights on there. You know, to try to find a better solution to what's going on and
It's difficult. Modifying human behavior is difficult. And I realize that people that want to disobey the law are going to do that. That's why we have fines and fees and jails. But it sounds like that it's not totally out of the question to consider adding some sort of speed rumble in the area. I would just ask that you explore it, because while it may not discourage everyone, if I can even get 50% of the people that are passing illegally on the right to stop, that's still significant. So I just consider it. Thank you.
Ryan, I don't see any other hands up, so I'm going to go through maybe a couple quick questions here, and either they're likely yes or no, or just tell me, Joe, we got to talk about it offline. It takes too long to get into it. But the first one is, you already heard Ms. Gilbert and Councilmember Edens mention. Can you take that away about looking to see if there is a no passing sign that can be put on that location? I think you already probably wrote that down, but I think that was a clear ask, and maybe that's something fairly easy you could do. So that's one. The next one here is just again a question. It's probably, I'm just looking for a short answer, Ryan, but I've seen in traveling, there are certain areas that are designated as sort of like safety corridors, distracted driving corridors. Is that something that MoDOT would consider classifying this section of the road? Because usually in those areas, there are increased fines for people who violate the law. And so therefore it is used as a deterrent and brings accident rates down. Is that something you guys have done elsewhere? Is that something we should look at? And I know that may not be you, because it may be an ordinance thing too with the city.
We can look to prepare the information regarding, and the term that you're talking about is travel safe zones.
Yep.
It's a temporary thing that can be done, that can be implemented usually through a year. There's always a sunset on them. Our traffic department can kind of obtain the information regarding, you know, can this be, you know, send it to our central office traffic and safety officers. Can this route throughout this area be considered a travel safe zone? I'm sure maybe the criteria can probably be met to establish that. And with an approval from central office traffic and safety, it's something where it can be deemed. But it's a partnership where if the city is, you know, basically what it does, it also helps if, you know, maybe the city passes an ordinance, but also it's something where a commitment, you know, some type of letter of support from the city and the city's police department is sent to our part saying we are in favor of, you know, utilizing this stretch of roadway as a travel safe zone. You know, the signs go up where it's doubled in. There also has to be, you know, I would also work with the city regarding some type of communication plan of why we are doing this. Many times, especially with especially with the times that we've been in, may be seen as a money grab. What's going on. So, however, with most of the thoughts that you guys hear and what we're talking about and what we've heard from other folks and residents, it seems like, like I said, it's a temporary measure, and that can be done on the interim side if the city supports it. Our traffic team can get the documents ready to submit it along with the letters of supports from the city and the police department, the local law enforcement. Gives you guys some teeth to enforce a little bit more and do those inactive fines. It's kind of studied over a period of a year or two. I think a couple years is about as long as I've ever seen them done. But then it's also kind of saying, have we seen speeding and all that stuff? I think we evaluate it every 6 to 12 months, and just to see is it been enforced? Has it been done? Are people slowing down because they're becoming more aware that they're traveling so fast? So that's the way that kind of works. That's the process on that, and it's kind of a partnership between both of us.
Fair enough. And then I'll leave that to the Board of Public Safety to discuss and figure out if that's maybe a tool in the toolbox that we can think about. So let's see, moving on. Ryan, just one more thing, because I've got some residents that have contacted me, Miss Farron and Miss Schneider. They travel on Taylor Road and 100 there, and you obviously know the history with Taylor Road as well. It was not in the scope of this report, but I'm still hearing that folks just don't feel comfortable crossing Taylor Road. We did have an accident recently. Miss Schneider's daughter got hit over there, but I'm going to only ask, you don't have to talk into it, but please keep Taylor Road on your mind as well as you think about what options and tools you have that you can do to help that intersection. That's all I got. I don't see any other hands up. Mr. Bros, Councilmember Bros, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess on Rick, do I understand that you're going to forward to Ryan those plans you prepared back in 2018 for the Woodland?
I can certainly do that, sir. Yes.
I mean, Ryan, is that what your request was?
It wasn't a request. I was just curious, but I mean, maybe our report, maybe what we had done, just kind of added on to it. Like I said, it sounded like something Rick said he'd done, just kind of initial, and included some other information on our part. Maybe we took some of what was there and then we included it in ours, but we did a little bit more in-depth study and kind of did an overlay conceptual. It's not anywhere close to like its early prelim plans or anything, but we kind of conceptualized.
Okay, can we go ahead and Steve, when you prepare that Excel spreadsheet, can we put that on as an item?
Yes, sir. Will do.
Yeah, just whether it is an up or a down or whatever, just so we can track it. It won't get lost again, maybe.
And what do you want? What identify that again? What do you want to call that? What is?
Well, I would say $180,000, but Rick, what would you call it?
Well, it was our initial conceptual plan for the intersection.
Sounds good.
Yes, sir. Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I don't see any other hands up. So, Ryan, thank you for joining us here. Before I let you go, I'm going to just check and see if you have anything before we let Ryan go. And then also, Rick, let me know. I mean, we have it under 4 actions, so I don't know if it's at this point requiring that we do anything with this point, but I'll leave that up to you to tell us.
I noticed the same, and I had the similar thought, Councilmember Garitano. I don't know that we intended the committee to adopt it or approve it, but certainly welcome the feedback and the comments. So I think this point, that's what we were looking for. And we'll move forward getting Ryan that information and trying our best to track the implementation of these things and providing feedback on a monthly basis if we can do it.
City Administrator Cross, you got your hand up?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Regarding any action, what we were trying to do was to at least allow this committee to review this report first. It's not gone anywhere beyond here, at least to the full council. So if the committee wishes, we can then forward this report, because I'm sure other folks might be interested in it as well. But if the committee feels that this report then should need to be forwarded on to other council members or anyone else, we can certainly do that.
Okay, well then, I will look for a motion on that. If someone is willing to make a motion to forward the report to the council, made by Councilmember Remy, seconded by Councilmember Bertolino.
Point of information,
Yes.
as recommended by Mr. Cross, it included other relevant groups. Perhaps the Board of Public Safety should be copied as well.
Okay.
Is that included in the main motion?
Makers are fine with that? I see Mr. Bertolino, Mr. Remy's got his thumbs up. All right, so that is included in the motion. We'll go to Board of Public Safety and the council. So on that motion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. I know you've got your hands full and we are not your only municipality, but we truly appreciate what you're doing, and we need your continued advocacy for the road there to really help us out. As you've heard, Miss Gilbert and others, you know, we want to get them to the point where they're feeling safer than they are today. So anything you could do, and of course, you let us know how we can help you with that.
No, I appreciate you guys' time this afternoon. I appreciate everything you guys have been doing on your side too, just trying to add other stuff and get them implemented earlier on than we can, and all the partnerships that we keep moving on. It's, you know, it's when it can come together like that, it's great. So it's appreciative on both sides. And like I said, I'll keep moving on my side as well.
Thanks, Ryan.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
All right, Ryan, you're welcome to stay with us and watch the rest of our meeting. We're going to talk now trash, Waste Connections. So, all right, well, have a good evening.
You guys
too. Rick, this one is on the Waste Connections, the 1-year extension. So Rick, go ahead.
I was actually hoping that our city administrator Cross would.
Oh, I apologize. If that's if he wants to talk trash, I will let him have it.
I can do it if that's. If he wants me to.
I love to talk trash. Where's Mr. Rambo?
Oh, him over there.
Yeah, we like to talk. We like to talk trash. So thank you, Mr. Chair. And Rick certainly can jump in if I misspeak on anything. Committee members, you noticed that for information at last night's meeting, the information that you're looking at here was presented last night. The reason for that, and as part of this memorandum, is a memorandum that Mr. Brown and I authored and presented to the committee back in December with regards to the upcoming renewal with Waste Connections. So you've all read the memorandum, but basically, August 1st would be the end of the initial two-year term agreement that we have with Waste Connections. The contract or the agreement calls for 3 one-year extensions. So we would be entering into the first of those one-year extensions if the committee and ultimately council approves that. The reason we're bringing it up now is that there is a time frame in which if the city chooses not to renew that contract with Waste Connections, we are obligated per the agreement to give them 90 days notice. That is on May the 1st. So we're bringing this we notified council last night just to give them a heads up. It's going to be, it's being brought up to the committee now to actually determine if you want to go forward with the renewal or you don't want to go forward with the renewal. That way, then with your recommendation, then would go to the council at the 26th meeting, April the 26th. And if council agreed with your recommendation to, let's say, not renew it, then we would have the time to be able to notify Waste Connections on May 1 of the city's intent to not renew the contract. And therefore we would have to go out to bid and all that sort of thing. So that's why the timing, that's why it's coming up now. Obviously, if the decision is to renew, that you all make that recommendation to renew and it goes to council and they agree, then we'll go forward and then we will begin the negotiations with Waste Connections. That'll come back to the committee well before the August 1st and so forth. But the reason it's being brought up now is simply because we have a time frame in which we need to meet that. So what we would be looking for from the committee this evening would be an approval that the committee wants to move forward with that 1-year renewal, and then we will prepare legislation and have that, or at least I'm not sure if we need legislation. John Young can tell us that, but it would then go to the council at the next council meeting, so that if they do, if they agree or they do not want to renew it, we hit that May 1 deadline. So that is the action, Mr. Chair, that we would be looking for from the committee this evening.
All right, I do see 2 hands up. I apologize. I don't know in which order they're in, but
Dave was first.
Dave Bertolino, well, that he is showing first on the list there. So Dave, is that, you doing that to make a motion or?
Twofold, Joe. And thanks, Rob, for age before beauty there.
Oh, you're on mute, Rob.
Barely.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we do approve the contract extension for the next year. But let me make 3 caveats to that. In negotiations with them and in talking with Waste Connections, I think they've done a marvelous job compared to where we were with Meridian. This has been they've been a godsend. They've been very good. But 3 things over the last year have popped up, and I'd like to just make note. Number 1 is I think we need more notice of the increase prior to the July or August date. I did have some calls last year, people saying, hey, how come my rate went up, even though it was like 14 cents or something. There were people said I was surprised by that. So we need to communicate a little better that there is going to be a rate increase. Number 2 is that a notice to residents when we miss a pickup due to conditions that are beyond the control of Waste Connections. And in particular, I have this annoying cul-de-sac in my neighborhood that people park on the cul-de-sac, and the trucks come in on Tuesday and Wednesday, and they are really reluctant to go around the cul-de-sac and pick up because they're afraid of hitting a car. I mean, it's just that narrow. So they don't pick up. Well, then the residents got all upset. How come they get, well, it's because your car was parked out there. So some way that we can immediately notify residents of why we didn't pick up their trash that day, put them on notice as to what they need to do. The third item is define what we mean by frequency of pickup. During that week of really bad weather in which the pickups got stretched out and they couldn't hit many roads because of the ice and snow, I actually had a couple of neighbors who complained and said, I pay for pickup every week. How come they didn't come and pick up? And I should be credited with that week that they missed, even though they came the next week and picked up everything that I put out. That's a little bit of annoyance, but I think it defines, how do we define pickup and what are the responsibilities of Waste Connections in terms of how frequently they pick up. So again, putting it back in really real terms, if they miss a week but pick up the next week, that's not a violation of the contract, and it's not a violation of what we committed to our residents that we would pick up their trash. But it does need definition, I think, for our residents to say, what we will do, folks, is pick up your trash as practical, whatever the words are. It's not that we guarantee you 52 weeks of pickup, and if we miss one, we're going to credit your account. That's not the case. So probably overstating that, but then maybe some of the other council members have had similar comments from their residents.
Councilmember Bertolino, those are all 3, and I've made note of all 3 of those items. With regards to the last one, I think we attempted to try to do that in a memorandum, either from Rick or myself, and I can't recall. During the snow when they missed it, we said, well, their obligation is to pick up the trash. And if it was picked up the next day or 2 days or something, the contract calls for them to pick up the trash. but there may be force majeure issues, and that's exactly what happened this last time, which may prevent them to pick it up on a scheduled pickup day, but they, in a lot of cases, in most cases, in fact, didn't miss the pickup. But I think we attempted to try to explain that. I think we can do a better job, as you're suggesting, in terms of putting some language in there, or drafting communication from Waste Connections to the residents about what happens when there is a force majeure item, or there's other issues about private streets in particular, not being plowed, and those kinds of things. So we experienced some issues that we learned from, Mr. Brown and I, and we will definitely make sure that communication is better going forward.
Yeah,
So-
yes, I don't want to make the exception being the rule. And again, out of all the residents in my ward, I only heard a couple that said, oh, so I appreciate that always happens, but I think it does bring up a point that says maybe the residents do need a little bit better communication from Waste Connections. Says what happens when we have these emergency situations.
That's a very good suggestion, and we'll make that happen, sir.
Okay, so Councilmember Bertolino, I think you made the motion, but I don't know that I got a second. Would that be Councilmember Rambo? You had your hand up second, so I'll ask you.
Yes, but I also had a comment or a question.
Okay, so you will second it. All right, so go ahead with your comment.
Okay, this may require Mr. Young to weigh in. It's I think a contractual issue. I agree that they have been much better with their service and the predictability of pickups and so forth. I have, there is a hole in the contract big enough to drive a trash truck through, and I don't know if we can solve it or not, but it concerns the recycling pickups. I have a clearly marked green recycle bin on Wednesdays, and I have a clearly marked blue trash bin on Thursdays. And I have suspected many times and witnessed a couple of times that if they're both out there at the same time, for any reason, they'll dump one and then immediately dump the other into the same bin. And the hole in the contract is the provision that if the trash is commingled with, if the recycling is commingled with trash, they don't have to sort it, and they don't have to process it any further. They just get to dump it at their convenience. And so mine is not in fact commingled, and there are a whole lot of people trying to do the right thing out here and carefully separating their recycling, and it all gets dumped into the same damn bin anyway. And so I don't know if there's any way to contractually obligate them to only process, to process all the trash that is in fact not commingled with garbage. But I would love to see them do a much better job than that. So if Mr. Young is on the call, I see his icon, but he's muted. So I don't know if he could.
We'll see if he joins us. I mean, right now we are in the middle of the contract, so we're just renewing. It sounds like there would have to be a negotiation to amend the contract. That's just my guess, but Mr. Young can answer that.
Yeah, they should be obligated to meet the spirit of the agreement rather than the letter of that agreement, right?
Did you hear that, John? Do you need it repeated?
Well, I heard some of it. The short answer is they're obligated to meet the requirements of the contract. If we want to add specific requirements to any contract, at this point, essentially the process would be to terminate the contract and negotiate a new one. You can attempt to negotiate an addendum to the existing contract, and they may be amenable to that, they may not be, but the only way to really force the hand is to terminate and renegotiate.
Well, recycling is not happening. It's just, I think it's happening. I think probably most of the time, the recycling gets labeled as commingled with trash. And that way they get to just dump it in the landfill. And that's a common complaint. I've even spoken to trash truck drivers that work for Meridian, and they said that that's routinely what gets done. And so if we want to just continue to buy into that polite lie that we're actually doing some good with our recycling, that's one thing. I don't know how to enforce it other than monitor every truck as it comes into the facility. But I would like to figure out some way to ensure that they do a more responsible job with the recycle. Bins.
Rob, and I'm going to probably let the city administrator speak. And I know you and I think, have had this conversation. I just don't recall to what extent it got escalated. I don't know if it's a personnel issue or it's isolated to just a specific driver, or it could be a widespread practice that we do definitely either way need to correct. But I think the city administrator maybe might be able to have a conversation and try to see if we can just correct the issue there that's occurring. Certainly, if it's happening elsewhere, it's probably a systemic issue. But city administrator.
Well, he did that, and I'll get off of my high horse here. But Steve did make his effort. The customer service person, whose name I do not recall, called and spoke to me about it. But if I, as one of 35,000 residents, have seen it twice in 2 months, for example, then I am not the only person with a poor driver or with seeing that happen. And I have a great suspicion that it happens sort of ubiquitously. So if there's not much we can do about it easily, then I'll just live with that and continue to pretend that I'm getting my trash my recycling going to a good place. But there's no market in it. It costs them more. It's a hassle, blah, blah, blah. So
no, I mean, I think there's, I'll let the city administrator and director of public works speak. They both had their hands up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rambo, your concerns are certainly important. And again, if we're going to be a green city, a tree city, and all the things that Wildwood stands for, we want to make sure that recycling is done and it's not just a catchphrase. When we switched from Meridian to Waste Connections, you may recall when we went from single stream to dual stream, at that time, Meridian was telling us that the maximum amount of material that would be able to be recycled given their system was somewhere in the 25% to 27% range. When we went out to bid and we talked to the various providers, Waste Connections indicated that their percentage of material that would be recycled, given their vertical integration of basically cradle to grave, they have the landfill all the way to the MRF, the recycling center, was upwards of 90% or better. We put in the contract actually that we asked for monthly and quarterly reports that we could then provide to council or residents, showing that they in fact are hitting those targets in terms of the amount of material that is being recycled. We are getting reports. They're not as clear as I would like them to be. And quite frankly, the city, we did not do a very good job at the time we put this contract in place in August of 2019. And making sure that Waste Connections adhered to that requirement in the contract to provide those reports. Linda Jones is the lady that spoke with you. She is our point person. I don't know what her title is, but she basically handles the city of Wildwood. And quite honestly, the city of Wildwood is in fact their largest customer. I did speak with her on your behalf with regards to what was happening in your particular case. She did say they did talk to the driver. There was an education issue there with that driver and a laziness or whatever. I hope that they have corrected that. They know how important this contract is. I've not heard about this situation occurring in other areas of the city, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. But my intent And I'm sure that Mr. Brown's intent as well. And when we go into this contract, we will make sure that those same provisions are in there in terms of the contract, in terms of what the recycling. They have even offered that if any one of us, myself or you or any other council member, would like to go visit their recycling center to show them, and they can show us how they handle the materials and how they are actually being recycled. I think their recycling center is in Kansas, and they've actually said that they will take us out there and we can see their whole stream from top to bottom. That's a very generous offer. So right now I have a little higher expectation, or I believe that they're doing better than just throwing everything in one bin and not doing any recycling. I can't say with certainty, Mr. Rambo, in terms of what they're doing. But whenever we, if we hear about these situations, we are bringing it to their attention. And the fact that it did occur and you've observed it, she's aware of it, Linda Jones. And we will make sure that whatever language we need to put in the contract, we can do that. But we can't guard against unless we see it or hear about it, that a driver just gets flat lazy and decides to throw both bins in one truck. Not sure.
Sure. I had no question at all that you guys fell down on the job or weren't on top of the situation. And the lady was nice to me when she called, but it was just kind of customer service language, and there wasn't anything concrete. And so what I would suggest then is the problem, try to correct it with the contract language if you can, but the main thing might just be to get an accurate report that's easy to read, and we can trust that they're probably telling us mostly the truth in that report, and that should be plenty good enough. But as a side matter, I'd love to see that recycled in there.
Okay, well, in terms of the reports, so I'm not sure, quite honestly, this is my opinion and my opinion only, that we're a few months away from the contract renewal. I wouldn't suggest that we do anything now. I think that would just cause all kinds of problems, but definitely your concerns will be carried forth as we enter the negotiations, for the August 1 renewal, assuming that you all agree that that's what you want to do and the council agrees with that. Now they are required, because they do a lot of St. Louis County. They do not all of St. Louis County, but the vast majority. Those reports that I referenced, they are required to provide those reports to St. Louis County as well. Like I say, I'll take responsibility for the city that we have not done a good job in holding their feet to the fire and giving us reports. Or in fact, my last conversation with Linda was, I don't like these reports. Give me something better. Design a report that tells me, and I told her the specifics. I want to see how much material you are recycling. I want to know, I want to be able to go look on a report and it says 90% or 85% or 25%, because the reports that we're getting right now doesn't give me that information. So to me, they're worthless. And so that is kind of that's my issue, that I'm going to make damn sure that they give us reports that we can use, that tells us, all of us, the committee and the council, what the hell they're doing in terms of the amount of that's being recycled. So that's my soapbox, and that's the thing I'm gonna make sure happens.
That will probably solve a good bit of the problem. They can probably, they should, I'm confident that they break it down by recycle number, the number 1 plastic and number 2 plastic and in the triangle and so forth. They probably could give us the poundage and the percentage overall, and that might help us as a community figure out, where we're falling down and so forth as well. So thanks a lot for listening. I know that was a long diversion, but I think it's important.
No worries. All right, Councilmember Remy, you're up.
To your point, and your vigilance on this, as you know, there was an expose, and I want to say it was either on PBS or NPR in the last 2 years, that even dual stream companies that separated in front of your eyes actually all dump it in the same place. So I think getting a report like this is actually helpful and transparent to those of us that are hopeful that a large percentage of this recycling is actually getting recycled, rather than just sort of sleight of hand by some other companies that are known in this area specifically. So I think I'm also happy to send you expose when I find it from when it came out about a year ago or so, or 2 years ago. One thing I was going to just say though is as we renew the contract, one issue that did come up, and I got to say, first of all, this group has been fantastic in comparison to our previous supplier. What I would say is there was that unfortunate stretch of like snow on a Monday, and snow on a Tuesday. And Mr. Garitano is well aware of this, but Ward 3, Ward 8 was affected certainly by that. And it wasn't a one missed week. It was actually 3 missed weeks at one point, and people were extremely upset. And so I think when we go back to this Waste Connections, if we could just ask them to make sure that they do not have a situation where if it's missed for 1 week, then that group has to be priority for the next week. And I know they were working on Saturdays. I know they were not working on Sundays, but there were a number of members in my ward specifically that were also upset about the fact that they had 2 to 3 weeks worth of trash that still was not picked up. So if we could ask them to come up with a process and approach that can be transparent and explain how they would approach that going forward, because I think they're well aware of the issues that happened this past year, I think that would be most helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Remy. And you mentioned about them working on Saturdays. So yes, they did try to step up and catch some of those. One of the improvements that we are going to see, they would have gladly, they being Waste Connections, would have gladly worked on Sunday. However, the landfill is a union operation and therefore was closed on Sunday. That they are in negotiations with that union. In fact, may have already completed those negotiations because the last I spoke with Linda, which was about 3 weeks ago, or actually Eric, who is the divisional vice president, indicated that they were working with the union for the landfill to be open on Sundays. So if they get into the situation, they actually could then come around and pick up on Sundays and take that to the landfill or wherever they need to take it. So hopefully that has been accomplished, and that will definitely help in these situations where they get behind because of weather and so forth, and they can work both days of the weekends.
Oh, that's outstanding. Thank you for bringing that up. I really hope that that's going to be the case. Thank you.
All right, I got one more hand up. Councilmember Edens.
Yep, 2 things. I'll be super quick. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't on the back burner, but I know we had talked last time, Mr. Cross, and you were going to bring it up during contract negotiations, but I did have more than one resident that was enlisted in having an unlimited yard waste option rather than just calling and paying the extra $1 per bag. I think it was the inconvenience of not knowing what you'd need within 24 hours until you were kind of done with that yard work. So I don't know if that's something that they can individually do their own contract with Waste Connections, but I have heard that more than once. And then in the meantime, while you're waiting for a report, bold claim here. My advice is to not put the recycling bin and the trash bin out together next to each other. I would wheel one back on alternating days. That's what my neighborhood does. It's worked so far. Granted, I don't have an acre driveway, so it's not inconvenient, but it eliminates the problems. So consider it in the meantime, maybe a consumer behavior change.
Well, with regards to unlimited yard waste pickup, so Mr. Brown and I, in our communications, we've talked about a number of things. We've asked them to explore leaf pickup in the city to see if that is a possibility that individual, perhaps could contract with. That probably is not going to happen because that's an investment in trucks. The trucks that they have right now wouldn't be able to, but I said, at least give us some information that we could then go back to the residents. Ultimately, if it's something that the committee here would want to talk about. But unlimited yard waste is an item. They have also floated the idea that they are doing this in other municipalities where, and this kind of goes against what you just said, but everything is done on one day. You have your trash, you have your yard waste, and you recycle. So it's 3 trucks and one follows the other, and they go through. So it's one day, you put everything out on one day, and it saves having trucks in neighborhoods, and everything's done in one single day, and people don't have to remember, well, gee, Tuesday is trash day, Wednesday recycle day or yard waste, etc. Now, my response to that was, well, we'll talk about it. Tell us what you're thinking. Because they said, well, that'll save them costs. And I said, well, if it saves you costs, then I want that passed on to the residents. I want them to save costs if that's what you're going to do. So that'll be all part of the negotiations, and that ultimately that Mr. Brown and I will bring back to the committee. But if they want to do that, we'll have to see if you feel like that's something you want to do, and if it's going to save some money, and if you think that that is a good thing for our residents. You know, it is a change, it's an education, but there's several things that they're talking about. They're looking at the routes to try to improve how they handle the routes, even if they stay to the 2-day pickup during the week, looking at routes. So there's a number of things that they're looking at right now, anticipating this renewal, that hopefully would be better for the residents. Mr. Chair, I know that Mr. Brown had his hand up earlier. I don't know if he still wants to weigh in on anything, but with your permission, perhaps he may still want to bring up some items that I'm sure forgot.
Yeah, Mr. Brown, if you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, the only point I was going to make with regard to the recycling is we talked about mingling recycling and trash together. Well, one of the advantages we have, and Mr. Cross mentioned doing a single day pickup. Well, if you spread them apart, the advantage there is, in theory, on the day your pickup is for recycling, the recycling is out. On trash day, trash is out. There shouldn't be that intermingling of materials, hopefully. But I did want to mention, in regards to the issue of that issue, I'm not saying Mr. Rambo, you didn't have a concern at all, but I don't believe we've gotten any other complaints since we've had Waste Connections with regard to mixing of trash and recycling. I've not gotten that complaint. I don't believe that is a widespread problem. It's an important problem if it occurs, and it will be addressed by Waste Connections because it's a breach of the contract. They did not meet the requirements that are in the contract if that is being done. So if we have a complaint such as yours, we will certainly follow up and make sure it gets addressed by Waste Connections. And I guarantee you they will address it because it's a breach of contract. That's clear.
Okay. I don't see any other hands up. We've got the motion that was made on the floor. If anyone needs that motion repeated, please let us know. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and vote on the motion regarding the extension there. And again, now we'll go to council. So all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? The motion passes. All right. Enough
Thank
of
you, Mr.
trash
Chairman.
talk. Thank
Thank
you.
you, committee.
All right, moving on next, and hopefully maybe this is a quick one here. We have contractor proposals for 2021 tree planting and treatment of ash trees.
Thank you, Chair Garetano. Appreciate that. Tonight, we're bringing to you our proposals for 2021 for tree planting as well as ash tree treatment. As you know, we last year experienced the very clear evidence of the emerald ash borer throughout the city of Wildwood, and we saw a lot of dead ash trees as a result. So it is definitely here and making itself known. Last winter of 2019 into 2020, we did work with Davie Resource Group. We prepared a plan to either plant and or treat ash trees in response to the emerald ash borer. And we also had Davie do a citywide inventory of our ash tree population. So if you recall, last year we recommended the treatment of almost 400 ash trees. Those are the better variety species or the better quality ash trees that we have on our streets. And we actually were able to get authorization to treat half of those last year. And the plan is to go forward in 2021 and treat the other half of those 400 trees. So the recommendation that I'm bringing to you tonight is twofold. One is for treatment of ash trees, and secondly, it's for planting new trees on city streets in the town center area. Relative to the replanting of trees, we did put an RFP out on the street and asked for bids from tree contractors to replant trees. And for 2021, the department would like to do 2 tree planting programs, one in the spring and one in the fall. The replanting effort in the spring would be geared around the town center area. So it wouldn't be strictly replacing ash trees. It would be replacing dead trees that we've lost in the town center area. So that would be along Manchester Road, out on Main Street, Plaza Drive, Fountain Place, actually as far over as New College Avenue. So all those trees and tree grates within the town center area, we're planting over 60 new trees in that area in the spring. And then in the fall, we would move to replace primarily ash trees, but it would be replanting in neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods in the fall. That quantity would be at least that same amount, very well could be more, depending on how hard we get hit by the emerald ash borer this year and how many actual trees that we do remove. So based on the response to the RFP, we did get some really good bids for tree replanting. The contractor STL Tree Pros, was the low bid for replanting the number 15 container trees. And so that's the first recommendation, is a city contractor agreement with STL Tree Pros for spring 2021 tree planting in the town center area. That would be for a not to exceed amount of $13,000. The second recommendation is for a city contractor agreement with Arbor Masters, and that would be to treat another 200 trees citywide. These would be ash trees citywide, and that would be for the amount not to exceed $25,000. The Arbor Masters is based on their 2020 bid, which was intended to be a 2-year bid. They treated the first half of the trees last year. They would follow that this spring into summer, to finish that work for 2021. So that's the recommendation from the Department of Public Works, is the recommendation to move forward with the 2 agreements with those contractors. And I'm available for any questions regarding that recommendation.
All right, I do see 2 hands up. So Councilmember Rambo, you're up, and then I see Councilmember Remy. So again, we'll just ask, I don't know who is in order here based on the system here, but there's a preference.
I believe Councilmember Rambo, our internal arborist is first.
Okay, we will let the arborist go.
Right, and I promise not to carry on any longer than necessary. The city suffers from not having an arborist on staff, and this was seen at the time as the best we can do. My first question is, can you real quickly talk about how we're monitoring the efficacy of the treatment? Rick?
Councilman Rambo, that's a good question. The department, as you know, is working with Davey Resource Group, and we intend to continue that effort this summer. So Andy Berg is our representative, and I know you've talked to Andy. So we will have Andy out assisting in both projects, the continuation of the treatment, as well as the planting of the new trees. He's provided recommendations to us that went into the RFP, of course. So what I'm suggesting is that Andy would be the guy, and when he's out in Wildwood and he's assessing or working on the treatment of the second batch of trees, that would be the time that I think he would be best to go back and review the first batch of trees that we've treated. Obviously, the issue with the treatment is it's not a one and done treatment, unfortunately. So that the follow-up is a necessity. We'll have to do that and determine if next year we need to go back and retreat those first 200 trees or not. And I gather from what I've talked to Andy, I mean, the expectation was the treatment would last at least 2 years, maybe longer. So that would be the thing he'd have to review for us this summer.
So we really don't have a plan for monitoring. We're just hoping to ask Andy to do it when he's out and about doing the current phase that we're talking about. Is that kind of the plan?
The plan would be to have Davey do the monitoring, yes, this summer.
Yeah. Okay. So the species selection there was nothing about species other than ash for the replanting program. Do you have a handle on what we're replacing the dead ash trees with?
I don't have those species in front of me. Unfortunately, Andy's been taking the lead on that. He's been working to get that finalized, and I can follow up with you or have him give you a phone call to let you know where he stands with that specifically.
Yeah, I might send you a list of questions so I don't take up a lot of time here, Rick. I strongly object to the treatment in general. Every chemical is quite toxic. Some of them are neonicotinoids, which are famously deadly to all the pollinators, bees and other animals. And they're quite nasty. And the treatment, you have to really drench the ground. Generally, there's some injection methods that don't work quite as well, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just an awful mess. And I almost objected to this when I was first on council, when we were talking about this initially months ago, but I didn't want to, jump in and make a big stink. But I think we can probably make some better decisions on this whole program, and hopefully choose some species that are appropriate replacements. Do the planting properly. I know Andy knows all about how to plant trees properly, but I'm wondering if they're contractually obligated, these folks that we've chosen, to go back. Ms. Eden's mentioned watering in carefully and ensuring that they have adequate water and so forth, particularly the first year or so. And some of those basins in town center don't have enough drainage for any tree to thrive. It's sort of an anaerobic environment, and hopefully Andy has taken that into account when he makes the tree selection. So I'll shut up about it now. I don't know that we're going to get very good success out of this, and we certainly have too many ash trees to spend that kind of money, dumping toxic chemicals on them to try to save them. It might be better to just cut our losses. So that's my spiel.
All right. Councilmember Edens, you're up. Are you?
Remy.
Remy's up.
Remy.
My apologies. Remy is
No problem.
up. And
So,
then we'll go to Edens. Question, is there,
sure.
let me just ask you, is there a motion?
Yes, I'm
meant
going to make
ask that
a
before.
I'm going to make a motion right now.
All
So
right,
I'd like to, since we've got two different companies, I guess my motion is going to be to prepare legislation. It'll be two separate bills at council to prepare the legislation as delineated by by Mr. Brown. And I would ask, though, at the next meeting when this legislation is prepared and goes before council, could you have Andy come to be able to answer many of Councilmember Rambo's questions, so that we're all able to hear the answers in person?
Let me just check. Is that what the department is asking for? Two separate motions or one motion?
It doesn't matter to me, council member. Either way is fine, but I'll be glad to request Andy to be present at the next city council meeting where this would be on the agenda.
Chair Garitano, it's two different companies, correct? So would it be two different contracts?
Yeah, you could put them in one. You could put them in one motion, I believe, or city attorney.
Well, my motion was going to be one motion, but I was going to say, though, we didn't have to be two.
Oh yeah, one motion for both companies. Yes, correct.
Correct. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay,
Yeah, gotcha.
That's what I was wondering. I thought you wanted to make two separate motions.
No, one motion, but it'll be two separate legislation items for council.
We're on the same page. Okay, is there a second on that? Second by Councilmember Brost. All right, so the motion's on the floor. So Councilmember Edens,
just Rob mentioned my concern, but I wanted to ask the department if it wouldn't be prudent to also add in the watering, because it's really just about the replacement procedure and the the equipment. And my understanding is that first 24, 48 hours, especially the first 24, are really critical, especially if it's done in heat for root and tree replacement health, and Rob can correct me. So we might want to consider adding that as a requirement and implying that it's more than just sprinkling water with a hose, like a good soak.
Rick, do you have anything?
Yeah, that, Councilmember, we have a one-year replacement warranty on all the trees, so that usually gets their attention, and they're used to that requirement, and that's why we bring Andy into the mix to help him inspect the planting of the trees and make sure that they're installed properly and then watered among installation. In the past, we have worked with residents to potentially water them as well throughout the summer, and that's certainly something we can do again. All these locations where we have residents involved, we send postcards, and then we typically are following up on the phone with them relative to the process and what transpires.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Rambo, is your hand up again, or is that from before?
No, it's up again. Ken Remy made the point that I raised it to make, which was, could we have Andy Berg there? But I'd like to take that a little further and see if it's possible to get the species and Ms. Eden's questions and some other stuff that we can, correspond about tomorrow or so, already answered, so that we don't have to take up a lot of time discussing it, at the council meeting. Is that a possibility?
I think that's a great suggestion. If we can do any kind of pre-work ahead of time, would be helpful to get that out.
We'll see what we can do. We can certainly get the species list to you.
Yeah, sure. Rick, I'll send you, a few bullet points of things that I would be asking in the council meeting, and there's no sense in doing it if you can just put it in part of, as part of the documentation for the meeting.
Okay, sure thing.
That's it. Thank you.
All right, seeing no other hands up, we have the motion on the floor. Does anyone need the motion repeated that was made by Councilmember Remy? I don't see any hands up, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, that
Aye.
motion passes. I didn't hear any, there wasn't any abstain, was that? Was that just a delayed aye? Seems like it. Okay. All right, moving on, next item on the agenda under for information, under for action, we've got the remote participation policy. City Attorney Young, I'm going to suggest maybe since you had been working on this, I know you exchanged a couple of emails with Councilmember Remy, maybe get everyone up to speed on, I believe there was some language changes that were being suggested via email, and I think it'd be helpful just to point that out to the committee so they know what's changed, and then we can take it from there if that works for the committee.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just as by way of introduction to some of the discussion here, as you may recall, the remote participation policy, and I will say, to give credit where credit is due, the city administrator tried to make this point to me at the last admin public works meeting, and I was too thick to grasp on, about the relationship between the public the remote participation policy and the proposed charter amendment that would give the council flexibility with regard to the times of meetings. So there's been some review and discussion about the interrelationship between those two efforts. And I've had a couple of conversations with Councilmember Remy in an attempt to address some of the concerns that he raised, not only at the last admin public works meeting, but also I believe at a city council meeting regarding the interrelationship between the two. And based on those conversations, here's what I am suggesting. And I'm gonna try to do something here, and I hope I don't screw it up. Oh, well, never mind. I was going to try to share screen because I just noticed that the document that was posted with the agenda is not the most recent version. So I wanted to share my screen, but without being able to do that, I'll describe what I'm suggesting as an amendment to the remote participation policy. the first thing is the original draft was drafted as a resolution. So it was going to be kind of an informal of the council. It wasn't going to be an ordinance. So I'm suggesting codifying this, adding it to chapter 110, specifically section 110.210, by adding a new paragraph to the council's procedures. So this is the provision that has all the various council meeting procedures, and this would be codified as part of those council procedures. The second part of that is to provide a new paragraph. So just as a reminder, in the policy, there are prerequisites to remote participation. One is notice to the city clerk. And again, the rationale behind the notice to the city clerk is that if we have a meeting that is going to be an online meeting, the city needs to provide public notice of the availability of an online meeting per the Sunshine Law. Second is that everyone has to be, the technical requirements of everyone being visible and audible to everybody else. The other is that the council member or the mayor must assert either personal illness or disability, employment duties, military service, or a family or personal emergency is the reason for the need for remote participation. Again, intending to encourage in-person attendance to the extent possible. A requirement that a majority of the members of the council be physically present. The council members are prohibited from participating remotely more than 3 times in a calendar year. And that no more than 3 council members shall be permitted to participate remotely in any council meeting. Now, those are the prerequisites that we had set forth. Now we're going to get into the exceptions to those prerequisites. So number 1, we've built in the state of emergency exception. We'll call this the COVID exception. That the mayor, if he declares a state of emergency, he can allow everyone to participate remotely. This is the grant of authority that we had to rush to do to address the COVID situation. This is now built into this ordinance. The second is a reasonable accommodation for someone who is, because of some disability, is unable to physically attend council meetings. So this would allow the council to provide reasonable accommodation for a person who would otherwise be unable to attend the meetings because of some form of permanent or temporary disability. And this would not count towards the number of we'll call voluntary remote participations. And then finally, I added language that states, and I'm going to read this in its totality, should any city council meeting to be scheduled to begin prior to 7 p.m., the mayor and any council member may, and the city council shall provide accommodation for remote participation for the mayor and a number of council members equaling less than a majority of the entire membership of the city council at any such city council meeting. So the concept here is, and this is where we get that tie-in to the or to the proposed charter amendment, is if a council meeting occurs before 7 p.m., and this does not include work sessions, this is council meetings. If a council meeting occurs before 7 p.m., there has to be remote participation opportunity. We are still requiring a majority to be physically present, but it would be made available for more than otherwise would be made available for. Those are the proposed amendments I'm suggesting to what has been previously provided to you. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Oh, and it is worth noting again, well, I'll bring this up on this next item, but I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have on this subject.
Okay, so just want to see if we have questions regarding clarity, that you need to understand, or if with the what the language that City Attorney Young just went through, if you have obviously an issue with what's there, then certainly we'll want to discuss it. But otherwise, hopefully we can make the assumption then that we can hopefully get to a motion to move forward after we get through again any questions. So Councilmember Remy, you have your hand up, and then I do see Rambo and Edens. So Remy, you're up.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and I appreciate the city attorney for going through this all, and appreciate his working with us on this. I have a couple areas that I would love to also amend, and based off of the list that you just provided, would the chair want me to just go through them one by one as they so that myself and the attorney can just we can talk about it based off of what he just put out? I'm happy to do it. I have 3 items basically.
Yeah, I would say go through your 3 items there and then get it out there.
Sure. So I
And
would
by the
amend.
way, okay.
I would amend the 3 meetings annually to increase to 6 meetings annually, or 20. It would be the equivalent of 25% of all city council meetings. So that would be my first recommended amendment from 3 to 6. Number 2 is I would rectify the language so that it's not just any 3 members of council that could be remote or virtual. Since we're talking about a majority being present, I would probably say that could be 5 members, so that we equate it to the supermajority vote in person, which would be 11 people present, rather than just having 3, just in case there's some sort of reason why more than 3 couldn't make it and it's not delineated by an emergency. And then the last one is going to be in regards to closed session, but maybe we deal with this first and then we can come back to the closed session if you don't mind after we talk about these things.
All right. City Administrator.
I just emailed to the committee what I believe is the current draft that John Young was talking about for the remote policy. I just emailed that to you. So if you're able to open up your email, I think that's the one that he sent. I don't know why the other one was attached, but John, if you can check and just make sure that that's the draft, that the most current draft that I sent in the email to the committee.
Yes, sir, that is it.
Okay. So if y'all are able to see that, that's the current draft.
And I will note that the new language is actually highlighted and begins on page 3.
Okay, so Councilmember Remy, you made 3 items that you raised here. So I'd like to see if there are others that maybe are thinking of something similar or different, and then we can try to reconcile. So maybe let's take your first item that you mentioned there, which is, I believe, increasing the number of times from 3 to 6. Is
To 6.
anyone
Yes, sir.
have any 3 to 6, correct?
Yes,
3 to
sir.
6. Okay. So does anyone have an opinion regarding that? Or are we, from consensus perspective, okay with that? City Attorney Young, do you have anything you have to talk about that? Is that a fine number, or?
The number I provided was an arbitrary number to
Got it.
provide a
Okay.
talking point, so I have no objection.
Got it. So does anyone have an issue with that we need to just discuss specific to that? Otherwise, we'll put that on the list for now that, we'll take that into consideration if the committee wants to accept it. Seeing that no one has an opinion on that. All right, we'll move to your next one there. And Councilman Remy, just help us out. What's that next one that you have there?
Yeah, that was the no more than 3 members can be virtual. Since we're talking about the majority of council members, so if we looked at just majority, that would be 7 members. But I think in deference to, if we had to have a 2/3 majority vote at the council meeting, I probably would just align it with that. And so perhaps 11 would make more sense. And so that would be 5 council members rather than 3.
Okay, anyone have any thoughts on allowing up to 5 council members to participate remotely or any questions, thoughts, concerns? John, from a legal perspective, I see Councilmember Bertolino. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we're on the ragged edge of allowing the council members too many outs here. We've all been kind of stained by the pandemic, and we see the extreme situations that we were in this last year. But in a normal year, it's the obligation of council members to be present. And discussions, we know that discussions, arguments, whatever you want to call them, at at a council meeting are best performed in person, not remotely. I think we need to restrict the number of remote options to those extreme cases like physical disability, work requirements, and so on, and limit them to 3 times a year. I don't think we need to be putting a lot more outs in here. Just from the optic of what are our citizens expect us? They expect us to be at the council members, at the council meetings every week or every 2 weeks. So I'm a little gonna say no. I don't think we should expand it. Thank you.
Councilmember Remy, would you be willing to withdraw that one there, or do you
No,
want to have?
No, I wouldn't. And so, in first of all, I should tell you, I've never missed a council meeting, and I've got a pretty darn busy schedule. But I guess my clarifying question for the city attorney first, though, in relationship to this first, is when we talk about virtual, and I know we're talking about city council meetings. So city council meeting starts at 7. And are we referring at all to work session? And I'm asking that because theoretically, could you have 16 members virtual for work session, and then at 7 o'clock, 16 members be sitting in the seats, and would that still be within the purview of the remote participation? And why I'm asking this question is because, Dave, the problem is that when the mayor, I'll give you an example, when the mayor first asked if we could do the work session at 5 o'clock for the first time, I said that would be fine. The problem is that a Monday meeting at 5 o'clock for most of us that have pretty darn busy schedules, especially in a lot of the different academic or corporate worlds, 5 o'clock is exceedingly difficult to be there because Monday is usually the busiest day of the week. And unfortunately, I have standing meetings I can't get out of. And when I signed up for council, I signed up for council to be at 6 or 7 o'clock. And so what I would really hate to happen is that we change the rules on council members that are present and have never missed meetings because we're altering it for other reasons. And so if the work session is not underneath this, I'm happy to withdraw it.
John, did you want to answer that question or see what options we have?
Yes, the work sessions are not addressed in this provision.
They're not.
Okay, so you could be 100% virtual, and as long as the council meeting starts at 7 o'clock, then it's not a problem. And then for so you can have 16 members virtual up to that moment, and it doesn't affect it. I'm okay with withdrawing that part then if that's the case.
Yeah, there's nothing in this that would prohibit that.
John, to maybe protect that, what Ken's concern is, do we need to do maybe a separate policy or something so that it makes it clear that work sessions are not, or have their own, number of times?
Yeah, and that's perfectly
Okay.
fine. Yeah.
So Ken, we could deal with that separately, and we can put that in a policy and obviously bump the number up for that reason for the work session, if that's the concern there. But making sure people are there for the main meeting is the, obviously what we're talking about. Okay, Ken, then you're okay with it, with the 3 that we had. So John, just note that we're going to keep that at the 3. The next item that you had, Ken, what was that?
So this is going to be a longer discussion, but this is in regards to those 3 people that are not present at the council meeting for closed sessions. And, the attorney and I have had conversations. He sent me some information and, certainly the Brown Act and certainly the National League of Cities also has their own impressions upon this. But it's my assertion specifically for non-quasi judicial practices that many cities have been doing executive session, closed sessions virtually, as well as federal governments across the United States, as well as the state of California through the Brown Act. And so I would actually assert that closed session for 3 people that are not present at a meeting should be well within the purview of being able to still be remote. And my assertion is we can discuss that, but I've discussed this also with a number of different advisors like Mr. Young, and you get different opinions from different people. And so, I appreciate his sentiment on this one, but I feel pretty strongly that if we're willing to do a remote session, as long as it's not quasi judicial, that closed sessions should be well within that purview. And I would alter the language to not exclude people that are virtual for closed session. For that case, we've done it thus far successfully in this city for some different items in different committees, including hiring our city administrator and some other areas. So I think that there's no reason why we couldn't continue to do so.
So I think, if I recall, Ken, you guys seem like to come to a compromise via email where there were some instances where John would be comfortable, but I think there were like 1, 2, or 3 items where John, I think, kind of drew the line and said those he wouldn't be comfortable with. Are you okay with that compromise? Can we talk to that compromise with the group, or is that?
Could Mr. Young just tell the group exactly the compromise that he's providing?
Well, and again, this is, let me say this. Let me see if I can find it here real quick. The rationale, and I appreciate the sentiment, and I agree, there are differing opinions out there on this subject. The opinion I have on this is mostly to do with 3 subjects. 1, litigation-related matters. 2, personnel-related matters. And 3, emergency, safety, security, national security, city security type situations. And the reason behind that is this. There's, at this point, no teeth to enforce someone who violates the sanctity of the closed meeting. I have been in situations where, not necessarily on a Zoom call, but where I've dealt with city clients that had elected officials who did not maintain the secrecy of a closed meeting, and to the damage of the city. It is certainly easier to monitor in person. If someone tried to record it while in the closed meeting, the Sunshine Law provides that is a misdemeanor. So that is something that is enforceable. But the moment you open to a box screen, not knowing what's on the outside, especially when it comes for my business and providing legal advice, which sometimes has to do with very sensitive litigation and liability related subject matter, it becomes troublesome to me. I will tell you, I have been not in the city of Wildwood. I was in a situation in a closed meeting where someone was, over my advice, they participated remotely, out of the country, in fact. And I saw someone walk behind him on his screen, which terrified me the second it happened. And it was someone who was on a business trip with this person. So they were sharing a room, I guess. But those are the type of things that just are the cause for my concern, and not having any other way to enforce it. For like real estate related matters, if you reveal information pertaining to the purchase of real estate to the benefit of financial benefit of a third party, you're subject to prosecution. There's some laws that address those type of things. There's not on some of these other issues. So that's my desire and preference to just not have it because we keep it close. And the other issue is, and I will say, I don't know, depending upon the technology that we end up using, there is the issue of where are the servers and all that type of stuff. I mean, we're not dealing with national security issues, but as you may recall, early on, there were issues with Zoom and their security parameters. There were issues of people, Zoom bombing, I think was the phrase that we all learned early in the pandemic. Whether or not someone would be able to do that in a closed meeting, I don't know. I'm not technologically savvy enough to say. I would hope not. I think they fixed those issues. But again, it's just one of those things I'd rather not have to deal with. Frankly, I'd rather the city not have to deal with it. Now, that being said, the language I had suggested, and again, I will say this was not anything that Councilmember Remy did not agree to this. I just suggested it and said, hey, here's something we can work through. So to say it was a compromise, I think is unfair to him, but I did suggest it as a potential compromise. Is I put in the closed meeting language, and this is a paragraph H in the policy, and I'll read it to you in total. A majority of all the city council must be physically present at any closed meeting. The mayor nor any council member may remotely participate in a closed meeting closed pursuant to section 610.0211, which is litigation and legal issues, 3, which is personnel, 13, which is also personnel, 18, 19, and 20 deal with safety and security issues like emergency plans and building security protocols and codes and things of that nature. And then I provided also another catch-all, which is, or if by a majority vote of the members of the city council, the confidential purpose of the closed meeting warrants prohibiting participation in the closed meeting by video conference. So even if it's real estate, if the council says, no, we don't want to do this by video conference, the council by majority vote can choose to do so.
All right.
So, Chair, can I just, yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
I first and foremost, I appreciate that. And I'll just keep it very brief. You and I share that same concern about the sanctity of the closed meeting, whether in person, whether people leaving the room and revealing information or revealing it during a virtual session. So the answer to your question, Chair, is yes, I think this is a fantastic, these are good stipulations and I can get behind these in totality.
Okay. All right, good. So I think, Ken, we've covered your 3 items. I'm going to ask anybody else on this 3rd item, if you have a comment or something about it, or if there is. So Councilmember Edens and City Administrator Cross, City Administrator had your hand up before Edens. Is that something related to this 3rd item?
It had to do with H, what Mr. Young just read, but I will defer first to Councilmember Edens.
Yeah, I just suddenly became confused on H, and I have it in front of me because my understanding was, as it was presented before, that there was not an option for closed session that didn't require physical preference, which is what I prefer. So one more time, can you tell me that is still true as it's written, because it sounded like council could waive that? And I don't know if I'm okay with that.
That is still true as it is currently written. Correct.
That's how it is currently as well. All right. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, and I did have one more question, but it wasn't on this. So put me back in the line.
Okay, well, with this particular item here, I did notice there's Councilmember Edens. It sounds like you are not in favor of what I call the compromise. You rather would just not have the option.
Yeah, well, as Attorney Young explained, it's keeping the language exactly as it is now. But as a general statement, no, I'd much rather it be, and again, I realize it's not national security issues, but I would like to keep it as physically present. At least I don't want to open it back up into a conversation until we readdress our charter amendment language that we propose for violating said closed session rules, which Attorney Young just restated as a concern. So if we are going to continue to debate it, let's kick the can down the road on that till we get something else in place where there's actually better bumper lanes if somebody goes off the rails participating virtually.
That City Attorney Young, is that anything you want to say in regards to that, or does that work?
No, and that's fine.
Okay, City Administrator, you're up.
Mr. Young, when we were talking about H, you entitled that section closed meetings, and then you began reading what it says. Now I'm looking at the document that has the highlighted sections up above. Maybe I didn't hear it correctly, because what I'm looking at and what I believe I just emailed to everybody says a majority of all the city council must be physically present at any closed meeting. The mayor nor any council member may remotely participate in a closed meeting by video conference.
Correct. No, and that is correct, and that's exactly what you have before you.
It sounded like you went on and you were reading some more or something, and maybe I just misunderstood, but it sounded like there was something missing, or you're reading something that I wasn't seeing on my copy.
No, I'm reading to you a email correspondence I had with Councilmember Remy in our discussion about the language of paragraph H. I will put in the text the language itself that I've added, but no, what you have before you is exactly what you read. It does not include those revisions.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. So of the three items that Councilmember Remy mentioned, I think the only one where we had a difference was around closed session and hearing from Councilmember Edens's comment there. So that's it. Let me ask if there's any other comments or questions. Councilmember Edens.
Yeah, I just had one, and it doesn't really matter if we know the answer tonight, but my question was, so let's say we have a council member that's exceeded their times virtually. They've exceeded that 3 times. They don't have a great excuse. They're in Hawaii. Can they still attend virtually, but not be counted present and not vote? So just be moved into the participant panel and still ask questions and have or no? When we say that they cannot be counted, do they forfeit all rights? No right or wrong answer. I just want some clarity on that.
Yeah, I think the concept would be that they would not be present at the meeting. So if they want to attend as an attendee of the meeting, but they would not be a panelist.
All right, got it.
All right. Well, then I don't, Councilmember Broche, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to confirm that, so the remote participation falls into the 3 categories, like the illness, employment, or emergency. Is that what I'm seeing?
Those are the 2. Yes, with the caveat that I have suggested alternative language, which I am recommending for, and I'll call these the exigent circumstance absences. One is state of emergency. This is the COVID exemption. 2 is reasonable accommodation for someone with a physical disability that would prohibit them from attending. And 3 would be for any meetings starting prior to 7 p.m.
Okay, so like what Lauren said, if you're in Hawaii for a month, that doesn't count.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Councilmember Berlino.
Yeah, sorry, John, just you confused me there at the end. I apologize.
That's okay.
I'm thinking of our good lost soul, John Bolt, who could not attend physically.
Correct.
Are you saying that he'd be limited to 3 meetings?
No, I am saying that he was actually the motivation for the reasonable accommodation exception to that 3 attendance limitation.
So it's unlimited if you have disability.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
And just
All
a
right.
point of clarification, Chair. So we increased that 3 to 6. I just want to make sure for the language that we agreed upon.
I thought the number of times we were going to keep it at 3 because the question was answered about work session not counting, and you could attend as many work sessions remotely as it is
No,
now.
Mr. Bernalino Mr. Bernalino asked when I tried to move it from the number. Oh, I'm sorry. Number of people not present is 3.
We kept it
I
at
said-
3.
Correct. The number of the number of virtuals per person was increased from 3 to 6. We agreed on the clause. The first one I provided the amendment, and then I withdrew the second one for Mr. Bernalino, which was the number of people physically present.
Is that what the committee, Lauren, you're nodding?
Yeah,
Carla?
no, I thought you withdrew the whole motion as
Yeah.
well, and withdrew the 6 times present, that we were going to keep it at 3 because the concern was meetings that were too early. That's what I thought.
Mr.
No,
Chairman.
ma'am. That's why we have a recording of it, which is why it's good to have virtual.
Mr. Chairman, if I might suggest a separate votes on each of those 2 proposed amendments.
Okay, so why don't we do that then? So we have a vote. Let's get a motion, if that's correct, City Attorney.
I think you can treat Councilmember Remy's statement on, and Councilmember Remy, please step in if I'm overstepping here. But in paragraph C5, his motion would be to read, the mayor and each council member are prohibited from participating remotely more than 6 times in a calendar year.
Yes, sir.
And then, Mr. Chairman, I would ask for you to call for a second on that proposed amendment.
All right, so we have that amendment that then Councilmember Remy, I'm assuming you will make, but you need a second. Is anyone willing to second to 6? All right, so we've got Councilmember Farmer. I noticed your hand up, and then Councilmember Brost. Let's try this by voice vote. 6. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any oppose?
Oh,
No.
Opposed.
We have, hold on. We got Councilmember Edens, Bertolino, and Rambo, I believe. Is that right?
Right.
Do a roll
I'm still
call.
waiting to ask a question.
Okay. It is a tie. So it does not pass. So, right? Am I getting that correctly, Carla? I think so.
There's
Or-
7
no,
members.
Oh, no. Okay, it passes. Okay. It'll go to council with that one. All right. I forgot to count myself. So, all right.
You don't
The next one, number of people. Is this keep it at 3, or Councilmember Remy, are you proposing to change that?
Nope. Keep it at 3. I'll agree with Councilman Bertolino.
All right, so we'll make a motion to keep the number of people up to 3.
If Councilmember Remy removed his motion, I would say just leave it as is. I don't-
Okay, leave it as is.
A separate motion, it's not necessary.
Okay, the closed session item is in the language already, City Attorney Young?
The language that is proposed is a prohibition. If there's a desire to amend it consistent with the language that is posted in the chat comments, a motion would be appropriate for that.
Okay, so
position.
therefore the motion would need to be made if we want to amend it according to what I was referring to as that compromise language. And I won't get into referring to it, the details, but I think you all are aware. If not, if you have questions, we'll have John explain it.
Yeah, may I ask a question, please?
All right, let's just get a second on that motion. Is there anyone willing to make a second on the motion?
Well, Chair, am I the maker of the motion right now?
I thought that was, are you? Yes. I thought-
I fully support the language of the Remy Young compromise. However, what I would say is, listen, I'm more than happy to revisit that language after we craft in this body some new language specifically for closed session violations. If Councilmember Edens and others are okay with that, when we come back to that after that language is adopted, I would love to be able to bring that back to the floor.
Okay, so we're gonna leave it now as is, so no compromise language. All right, Councilmember Rambo, you had something.
I've had something. The time may have passed, but I was so damn miserable I could barely see straight at the meeting last night. I almost wanted to go curl up in the corner, and so that's a sort of a chronic problem, not an acute one. And I see a time in the not too distant future when I may need to remotely participate in it. And there may be other folks like myself who might have to just sort of randomly bow out of a meeting. And I'm wondering if that's part of the reasonable accommodation as we discussed for someone with a disability, because my problem is it just sort of flares up. So how is that addressed, Mr. Young?
There's two ways it could be addressed. If it is something that is infrequent, you have up to 6 times per year to declare a personal illness that would allow you to remotely participate. The second option is if it does rise to the level of a permanent or temporary disability, then you are allowed to participate without it counting towards the number of without it counting towards the 6 times per year you would be allowed to otherwise remotely participate.
Okay, so if someone like myself were to show his MRI and X-rays to Dr. Remy, we could get an excuse written or something like that?
The language that I have in here about the disability is that it is upon presentation of appropriate documentation supportive of the need for the reasonable accommodation.
Okay, that's good enough.
We'll have the city surgeon general evaluate you.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I just want to let you know that this gentleman is neither my patient nor my friend. So I just want to make sure we know that. Thank you.
Well, then why do you keep asking to probe me?
The trash talk. We're back to the trash talk again.
Well,
you mess with the bull, you get the horns.
All right, guys, we're almost done. We're making sausage here. A lot of details, but all right. So with that, we did do these individual votes. John, am I thinking that we need to then make an overall motion to send this to council with the already voted on items?
Yes, Mr. Chair, would be to send it along to City Council with a recommendation of approval as amended.
As amended. So is someone willing to make that motion? Councilmember Farmer and Councilmember Bertolino. All right, hopefully we've all discussed this one, so I don't see any other hands up. Okay, let's see if a voice vote works. Send it to council, again, with the amendment, which is the one amendment that we increased the number through to 6. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Sorry, any opposed? Nope. Any abstain? All right, it passes. All right, we are very close, and I'm gonna see. Let's see, we get this one here because I think we've hashed this one out, the next one out quite a bit. So I'm hoping it's a simple one. But this is the start time, and where we had left off, John. I think this one here, and I thank Councilmember Edens too for calling it out. We voted, I think, at the last meeting to change the time to 7 p.m. It does have an or clause in there, which I believe allows flexibility to what we heard earlier. But I don't know if there's anything else you want to call out, John. So I'm going to let you highlight it.
No, I think the language that you have before you is the language that you have seen repeatedly over the course of several months now. I will say at the last Edmond Public Works meeting, I was tasked with working with Councilmember Remy on some language regarding remote participation. But I think the intent of the language that was placed in the ordinance that was just recommended for approval to the City Council, I believe addresses those issues. So what you have before you is the original language, but for the 7 p.m. amendment.
Yeah, because if I recall, I think we did take a vote on that last time to make it 7 PM. So therefore, John, would we be voting, we'd have to vote with an amendment to what's available, what's in front of us now to 7 PM? Because it's not there now, the 7, it says 6:30.
If it is fully understood and there's a motion to approve, subject to the language being corrected to 7 PM. Because if it was already voted upon, I think a correction is a Scrivener's error, does not require an amendment, a formal amendment.
Councilmember Edens, is that your recollection that we vote to 7?
Yes, it's in the minutes as well that amendment passed to 7. So editorial is fine.
Okay, so is there, Councilmember Edens, do you have anything else before I go to Councilmember Bertolino?
Nope,
Okay,
that's it.
Councilmember Bertolino, you're up.
Yeah, don't want to belay this any farther, but John, the proposition 1 as stated in here, if I was a citizen just walking into the booth and saying, looking at this, I would be totally confused. I would say, what's the council doing here? Is there any way we can rewrite this that puts it more in perspective of what we're trying to do?
We can. There's 2 issues with drafting proposition language. Number 1 is, per the Board of Elections, we are limited to the number of characters we're allowed to use. I'd have to go back and look, but I want to say it may be 40 characters. The second is that we have to word it in a way that it's not misleading or suggestive of support or opposition. So typically, the best way to do that is to refer the public to an ordinance that sets forth what the amendment is. Now, in terms of amended to allow the city council to establish start times for regular meetings, I think that's descriptive. I think it's concise, but I'm happy to work on other language, but again, subject to those limitations that we do have.
Well, I'm all for making this change, but I think we need to work on that proposition language a little bit.
Okay. I will, if the committee recommends approval, I'll tinker with it in anticipation of the next council meeting, because since this has been presented to the council and referred to committee, the language that was at the council at the time is what will go back, and the committee would be recommending amendments. So I will come back with some language in anticipation of that meeting so that an amendment could be made if desired.
Okay. Someone going to make a motion then for this? Or do you have
So
a-
move.
Okay, made by Councilmember Bertolino, seconded by Councilmember Brost. Any other questions or discussion on the matter? All right, we'll try a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any oppose? Any abstain? All right, the motion passes. All right, so now I'll go to council. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up the meeting here. We got through a lot, quite a bit, but I'm glad we flushed through these items here. So next meeting will be May 4th. And that is it. Is there a motion for anything on the miscellaneous before we end it?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Chair Garitano, do you mind, just given the gravity of what the attorney and others have mentioned, could we put at least on the calendar, maybe for the next Admin Public Works, at least a first evaluation of how to craft language for closed session for dealing with some of the sanctity issues that were brought up?
I see City Administrator Cross writing something down, so I think we'll put that on the list where it's not ready for action, and then we'll,
Thank you.
schedule those.
Councilmember Remy, you want to repeat what you want to have on the agenda for next week or next meeting, please?
Have it closed session etiquette and violations.
Okay. And then City Administrator, you had your hand up.
Right, hang on, let me just finish that note. Etiquette and violations, okay. Just want to note that right now on the agenda, the May 4th meeting starting at 5:30 PM. Want to make sure everybody's okay with that.
Wouldn't it be better to wait till there's the next new committee assignments
Yeah,
and then
well-
email everybody on the committee and see if they're okay with it? Because
I think we'll leave it now and let them decide how it is. I would even recommend that maybe we start doing a hybrid approach where if somebody wants to meet in person, we're doing it in council, we might be ready to start doing that for some folks. All right, so, yes, City Administrator Cross.
That's something we would need to talk about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm just throwing it
City
out
Hall
there.
is technically still closed.
Oh.
We are only doing council meetings because that's what the mayor wants, but no other committees are meeting in person right now because we're trying to follow county guidelines and so forth. So we want to tread carefully there, about meeting in person because that has ramifications throughout City Hall and throughout all the committees.
Okay, that's good to know. Just was thinking that maybe at some point, but you let us know then when that time is. All right, so with that, is there a motion to adjourn? Or do we want to stay and hang out? All right, Councilmember Farmer and Councilmember Bros. Larry wants to hang out. He's not ready to go. I mean, we're going to sit here. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I
Okay. Any opposed, any abstain?